call Monday, February 14th. Policies and priors committee meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Councilmember.
That the February 14th, 2022 Policies and Priorities Committee meeting agenda be approved as presented.
Second. Councilor Majinski. All in favor? Great. Adoption of the minutes, January 10th, 2022 policies and priors minutes. Recommendation. Councilor Majinski.
That the January 10th, 2022 priorities meeting minutes be approved as presented.
Councilor. Any errors or omissions? Council? Staff?
No.
All in favor? Any business arising from this?
Mr. Chair.
Your worship?
Thank you. Item 5.4, the Snowmobile Club. Just wondering if staff has reached out to the Snowmobile Club or if we need a motion to do that. I think that's important. I did have a meeting here last week with Flinro and they seemed to be open for possible changes. So I think that meeting needs to take place.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. We've reached out twice and are waiting a response.
Anything else from council? Staff?
No.
Okay. Move on to delegations. 4.1, our first one is the Ambulance Paramedics of BC. Provincial President Troy Clifford via Zoom regarding correspondence received about the UBCM meetings. The floor is yours, Mr. Clifford.
You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. So thank you for having me. So just timelines, I just had a brief, just a verbal presentation, and then I plan to answer any questions you had if that's appropriate for your folks. And then usually it stirs up some questions and discussions, and then I would send out a package of follow-up, just some information on what we discussed and sort of what I reference here. So that's my approach for today. So I'll just jump right into it then. You guys are ready for me now?
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay, a little hard to hear you guys in the room there, but I think I'm good. So obviously I'm Troy Clifford. I'm the provincial president with the Ambulance Paramedics and Dispatchers of BC, which is a provincial entity that holds a dual role in BC. We represent 4,500 paramedics and dispatchers across BC, so for every community, including yours. They're all within our membership. But we have a dual role in BC, and I'll get into that a little later, but just with my history, I work in the interior of BC. I'm in Kamloops right now, and I work all over the province. But so I'm primarily an interior paramedic, and but I've been in Vancouver and that, and I just been in the job 34 years in pretty much every role, right from remote to urban and metro. So I have pretty good exposure to all the different dynamics of the types of service deliveries that we have. And I took this role on, I'm in my second term as president, and as you guys know, it's been a couple years of really challenging for not only our service, but the province and communities such as yours. And that's really where we're going right now. But in BC, we have a unique role as we are the union that represents those paramedics and dispatchers that I mentioned, but we're also the professional voice in BC. And what I mean by that is we're attached to at the BC chapter of the Paramedic Association of Canada, and in each province they have a chapter that's the professional voice and advocate for that side of our role. And why we're unique in BC is most provinces and jurisdictions have and other health disciplines and professions have a professional body that's separate to their union. We do both in BC. And it's unique in the sense that that's why you see us advocating for things like engagement, service delivery, scope of practice, training, and these things are non-traditional advocacy roles of a union. And that's really what stimulates the discussions with communities and municipalities and government and lobby efforts that we talk about, but also those partnerships that we can work together on things. And that's really the engagement of your community, but all the communities across the province. The other unique thing that we have in BC as a profession is the paramedics and dispatchers. We straddle two different professional disciplines. We're frontline health, obviously, but we're also public safety. And those are two unique roles that we embrace both very well. We're not just in a hospital or in healthcare. We're in community and we're in public safety. And what I mean by that is the disciplines of public safety or police, fire, ambulance. And we're actually designated a public safety occupation under the CRA regulation with our partners in police and fire and corrections and coast guards and those type of public safety things. And I'm really proud of that. But over the years, when we moved into health authority under the Provincial Health Services Authority, we diverged ourselves from that public safety side of things. And really where that came to light was last summer when we faced the heat dome. Leading up to that, every summer we see fires, flooding, all these sorts of natural disasters. And the move away in PHSA really shifted us from that relationship with our public safety partners in emergency management. And the heat dome really exposed that last summer. We're leading up to the end of June and early July, where the ambulance service was questioned. Their response was definitely questioned, not only by the public, the media, but it was evident by the lack of preparedness from emergency preparedness side. They didn't open any OC, or they didn't even do any planning towards this. And that was questioned by the government, to the point where on July 14th, Minister of Health made significant announcements to change the structure of the ambulance service and the governance by putting in a new board to oversee the ambulance service, and a new executive officer and a chief ambulance officer, and a number of other announcements to enhance the ambulance service, including converting communities to Alpha cars, which is a full-time 24-hour, enhancing the schedule on call, which your community is in, and additional resources in the Lower Mainland and that. So, and that was recognized as well as our mental health and psychological injuries of our members that were the highest industry in the province. And recognizing the shortages we have for recruitment retention, which is a challenge in a lot of remote and rural communities like yourselves. And you've seen that probably in the news of the challenges we've had recruiting into the profession. And then in December, there were some enhanced announcements around emergency preparedness and supports for mental health and wellness, but also clinical support for the rural and remote and Indigenous framework that is being discussed to get permanent resources under that umbrella. Because if you recall, in April of 2020, the Premier announced the rural and remote and Indigenous framework, and within that was some temporary resources in the ambulance service, but also additional 55 and 5 is what they called it, 5 additional air resources and 55 additional ground ambulances. And following that temporary surge resources that they were mandated to do under that guise, they're to become permanent. And we're in discussions right now how those resources will become permanent. And how that's important to communities like yourselves is that needs to be determined how we are going to address the rural and remote framework within the ambulance service to support the communities that need enhancements and need those structures that have been not supported in the way they have been. So I'm excited about some of these announcements that are coming, but really the reason I reached out is when I came into this role, I recognized a number of relationships that were not built, and that's one thing with the municipalities. Even though we're funded differently, municipalities and regional districts are within different funding structure, and the ambulance service is under the Ministry of Health and ultimately PHSA, BCHS. The relationships on the front lines in communities, paramedics, firefighters, police, they're all part of your community, and unless we plan and prepare together like we used to a lot more, we're not going to be able to respond to these major incidents and build those relationships in the communities. And I think that's where the conversations have proven very productive, particularly with the enhancements of the ambulance service in rural and remote, where I've worked with many communities. I've been working with Valemont and McBride, Mackenzie. I've met with a lot of people that are in your sort of your jurisdictions or your geographical areas on it. But we're talking to a lot of communities and just making sure that they understand what the needs are and where to lobby and where to talk to get the right community supports. in healthcare, community care, or the ambulance services to lobby and pressure for what your community needs for the safety of your patients and your citizens of your community. So those are sort of where that relationship with municipalities has opened up these conversations in what we can do to work together, how I can help you. I was instrumental in working with Revelstoke, Golden, Kimberley, Fernie, and Invermere for the implementation of the 24-hour ambulance. Leading out of July, they added 24 communities that were originally going to go to scheduled on-call like your community had, and they enhanced them to full-time 24-hour ambulances. And I worked with the mayors in those communities and their councils, as well as the local medical communities, to really work with the government to understand the needs of their community and that these service delivery models need to be enhanced. And I'm really proud of that relationship we worked through. I've been doing that with Valemont, McBride, and Mackenzie recently, because they were not included in those models. A lot of communities in the north were, like Chetwynd, Fort Nelson, they were both added to, and then out west we had Hazelton, Valemont, Vanderhoop, and Fort St. James. Houston were all added to 24-hour ambulances. So there's a lot of improvements that have been made in the province, particularly in northern. And but we still have a long way to go, and we're hoping to have those discussions under the rural and remote indigenous framework to what's the next step for communities. So I've talked a lot about things, but really I wanted to talk about where we're at, where we're going, and how we can better work together, and hopefully just open up a conversation with you folks about your community and what we can do to help. The other key thing is that I know that right now we're in the worst of my 34 years of ability to recruit into our profession, and that's primarily because of our on-call model. They've added with SOC, scheduled on-call, that's a term, sorry to use the term we use. They've added and enhanced service in community, but it hasn't proven to be transitioned to solving the staffing and workload and improvement issues that we've seen in the community. So that's a very distinct conversation we need to have with a lot of communities that were not went to full-time, but are still in the scheduled on-call model. So I will stop there, and I'm sure that there's questions or comments or anything, but it's really about building the relationships. And I'll send a package out of some things that are important to help understand.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We did have some technical issues in the beginning. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, you're a lot better now.
Okay, perfect. Staff has fixed that problem. From council, is there any questions from council? Councilor Lehman?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You said that you got 50 or 55 new ambulances, but do you have the personnel to man those?
So that's the big challenge. So those are 55 additional, and they've been in place since April of 2020 when the announcement happened. And they're strategically located around the province. And they were primarily initially mandated to cover off for additional surge resources as a result of COVID needs to transport to tertiary hospitals, whether you have to get into Dawson or Fort St. John or into Prince George, to use your area as an example. But there was also 55, the 5 additional air ambulances, which included the one based out of Fort St. John, and then the additional helicopter and 24-hour ambulance based out of Prince George. So those are already in place. But to answer your question more specifically, no, we don't have. We have enough for the full-time positions, but what that's affected is our rural and remote communities, because that's where we're drawing for these more full-time or expanded positions. And quite frankly, the challenge we have right now is we're competing against industry, we're competing against other health disciplines, and people aren't coming into this profession because of the precarious model of the on-call model, the $2 an hour, if you've heard about that. So there's an acknowledgement by both parties that has to change. We've been working with government on recruitment and more targeted training for communities to recruit, but unless we change that precarious model, we're not going to be able to sustain the hiring people coming into the profession. So, and we also have to utilize our current employees that are in communities that need to be advanced up in training and that. So, yes and no. We do for the expanded, more advantageous work in full-time work, that people will come for full-time work. But they're not gonna sacrifice when they have other options, and it's really a human resources supply and demand situation right now. So when you're in that situation, you have to find different ways. That's probably one of our biggest challenges right now.
Thank you.
Anything else from council?
I don't have a good answer for you that, and that's where we have to work with the committee. But unless we recruit, the one thing that I've maintained, and I believe the BCHS is really on board with this, unless we recruit from communities like yours, we can't be transplanting people in there that don't want to be part of that community just to get a number to work for us. We need local people that are interested in providing that service, but we need to compensate them so that when they do provide those services, they're compensated appropriately or rewarded with training or other things. Because that's how we're going to sustain rural and remote ambulance services and recruit from within the communities. Because that's what we need to do. That's the model that worked in the past, but we can't rely on a volunteer model like we did when I started and early on. People they're just not volunteering anymore the way they did, and to expect that of a profession is not acceptable. I hear the argument, oh, it's quieter in X community, and that's just not, there's lots of models out there that make, who says that somebody in Tumbler doesn't deserve the same level of care that somebody in an urban center does. Now, how that is implemented is a whole other question. And I don't think there's an expectation you're going to have an ambulance on your doorstep when you live in rural communities, but you deserve a reasonable care and access to it, and not out of service. And that's really what I'm pushing for. And I have the new governance is really looking at how to do this better, and I believe the relationship is there from the previous regime. And there's an acknowledgement of rural and remote that needs to change. So I'm optimistic. It's not coming quick enough for the voids we have.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments there. I'm actually an ex-BC ambulance employee. I was actually a paramedic I was a paramedic in Tumbler, so I understand the volunteer of $2 being on a pager. I see the new system, and we had a chat with BC ambulance representatives directly with it, asking if that would help fill the station. They felt with doing alpha cars in certain communities that didn't have it, it's obviously helping the people that live there or the paramedics that were working there. And they figured that it would eventually help us because we've gotten rid of the $2 on pagers and gone to an on-call payout or pay system. But we're actually still short in Tumbler. Because not like you just said, you don't want to just transplant somebody into the community and hope they stay or force them to stay. We need to get people that want to be recruited from our own community. And I think with the on-call, scheduled on-calls, it might start to happen with people being able to use it against being able to apply for a mortgage, because you couldn't with the $2 being paid on pager. You take a lot of shifts and it adds up quite quickly, but you can never use that as an income. So my question would be to you in regards to the community paramedics that we have. So we have one in Tumbler. It's great service, I believe. The thing I find is now with the scheduled on call, that community paramedic now is also on call, and if they get called out in the middle of the night, cannot go to their patient contacts in the morning. They have to have that leeway of 8 hours off, which is obviously by policy, which makes sense. I hear they have one in Chetwynd as well, Fort St. John, I believe, in Dawson. Most of them seem to be part-time. Would you guys be looking at maybe trying to enforce it to go to full-time in all communities and having a fifth in the piece? So I'm only worried about number age and piece. So to me, if we have 4 community paramedics in these communities and a fifth one that can roam around when these guys go on holidays, it's a benefit for our residents. It's a benefit for our seniors, because I've already heard some concerns from some of our seniors that expect this community paramedic that's going to show up at 10 in the morning, whether they bake muffins or cookies because they know this person's coming for the visit, and then they have to cancel. And we heard from BC Ambulance a couple weeks ago that sometimes it's 15-minute notice to cancel. So I'd just like to know what your thoughts were there.
You've hit a nerve that absolutely, and you obviously know about the CP program. What we mean by the CP is Community Paramedic Program, which was highly successful. It's been proven, and what it is community paramedics have been historically outside of the general duty of ambulance, and they provide care in the community for call mitigation, for seniors, for wellness checks, for education and that, and it's proven very successful. And I'll send out the information on it so you guys understand it. But you're right, Tumbler Ridge has one, Chetwynd has one. Chetwynd now has a full-time one, and we've been pushing for, first of all, the scheduled on-call model incorporated the CP into the emergency care side of things, which is, as you just described better than I could, that's proven to really take away from the very valuable work they do. Those clients are vulnerable. They need to know when, and a lot of them are set by their routine. So there's been a real acknowledgement that we need to, under this World and Road, is to move the CP program back to a standalone and make more of them full-time. So a lot of them are half-time positions, so they're called regular part-time. So they do get wage and benefits, but they were on a scheduled rotation. So we need to expand those to be full-time positions in the community. And that supports the healthcare in the community, not to replace any community care, but it's to enhance it. And there's a lot more those could do. And in metro and in more urban centers, they can help with our mental health and addictions. They can help with wellness checks and call mitigation. For people, we know that addiction is not necessarily and mental wellness, unless a lot of times calling 911 or going to the emergency system is where the default is. But if we could find ways of referring them to the proper care in the right time, unless they're having an immediate crisis, we know that the best place for them is not necessarily in the back of an ambulance or in an emergency department. But those are where the community paramedic can be a resource in the community, and we've been absolutely working with them. Part of this rural and remote and indigenous framework is to exactly do what you're talking about. Get them back out of the immediate response, give them stabilized schedules so they can look after their clients and the community, and stabilize that. Because we're losing that with the new model that they put in place. And that was a vision of the ambulance service, that they thought this would be a better way to offset costs, but it's definitely not providing the care, and it's proving problematic for all the reasons you described. So we are pushing exactly what you described, and I think there's a move to do it more so in the province than there ever has been. So that's, I think, somewhere where we can work together to lobby for your community to have a standalone support and an enhanced CP program.
Okay, appreciate that. Anything else from council? All right, well, thank you very much, Troy, for joining us and updating us. Look forward to having the package sent to staff so that we can go through that as well. So I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I'll get you that information on CP, and if you decide you want to pursue something down that road, I can work with you to how to word that and word it to properly and ask, and if you're asking for it and we're endorsing it, and the ambulance service, I think it really comes down to how we can support enhanced care in your community and working with the medical community, and those are the ways we get things for your community, for sure.
Okay, perfect. Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Good night, I guess we're at now.
Yeah. 4.2 Northern Health, Tumbler Ridge Health Service, Melanie, Maracle Health Service Administrator via Zoom presenting regarding Tumbler Ridge Northern Health Services. Melanie, how are you?
I wasn't sure. I'm great, thank you, by the way. Charles and I had a bit of a meeting earlier that I guess Charleigh has to leave right at 5:45. So I'm just wondering, would council be amenable to flip and have the, Charleigh and Stacey's presentation first and then mine?
Okay, perfect, thank you. Council's good with that, going to 4.3?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna move 4.2 to 4.3, and then we'll come back to you, Melanie. So we're at 4.3, Northern Health South Peace Primary Care Network. Charleigh, Rudy, Charles, Helm, and Stacey Tyers. So this is, these folks were in and were presented to us at the Health Task Force. So we've actually asked them to come before council as well. So welcome, Charleigh and Mr. Helm and Stacey.
Thank you kindly, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Perfect. I just want to start off by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the traditional territory of Treaty 8 First Nations, and we really appreciate the time to have with you today. Part of what we're here to chat with you about is around primary care networks and healthcare transformation across BC. In the South Peace, which includes Dawson Creek, Tumbler Ridge, Chetwynd, and First Nations communities of Soto, West Moberly, and Kelly Lake, we have been working on primary care network planning, and we have been doing engagement. And we have a PCN steering committee created, which is a regional perspective, and we have been working on getting local community tables together to further support this primary care network planning. And the purpose of the local community tables is to really address the unique needs of each community. Through primary care networks and healthcare transformation, the Ministry of Health is going to allocate net new resources to the Southeast, and our hope is to be able to deploy these resources into the Southeast to better support primary care. And the purpose of the local community tables is to really understand how we can best serve each community, meeting the unique needs. So I'm just going to pause there and hand it over to Stacey to further chat about this.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Great. So Southeast has embarked on this journey of primary care networks. And I guess I should also introduce myself. I'm Stacey Tyers. I'm the primary care transformation partner with the General Practices Services Committee under Doctors of BC. Very long, I know. And I can't see all your faces, but I'm sure some of you have been there for a while, so I may have met you back in my previous life as a councillor for Terrace and the chair of the Regional District for Kinmanstiki. So I have a great appreciation for local government and all of the work that you do. Southeast is embarking on this journey and has established a governance structure that actually does allow resources that have been allocated to community to actually decide how those resources would be used in community. So the local tables need to be set up in a way to actually make decisions as resources become available to them. Of course, some resources, given the makeup of Southeast, would be regional resources, and that would be determined at a regional table. But some will be local to your community, so it's important that there's a structure in place that meets the mandates of the Ministry of Health that would allow for decision-making on resources as they come through after the engagement process and after the service plan is submitted. I'm not sure how much everybody knows, so I don't want to take up too much of your time if I'm just repeating stuff you already know. But please feel free to ask questions and we're happy to answer them.
So I'm not sure how much, this is when this came up, I believe it was in December or November from staff, and we weren't sure when they were talking about that committee. We thought it was something like for more people to sit with on the Southeast part. It wasn't. It's actually another committee to stand alone, or we talked about attaching it to the health task force as an arm. So that's why we've asked them to come, so council could ask questions if they had questions in regards to the committee, how it would be structured or set up. This is the one that Mayor Bertrand brought forward, and everybody was kind of thinking of something totally different. So there was just some misclarity there, and Councilor Lehman was away, and he'd actually chaired that meeting that happened at the health task force, so he couldn't even speak on behalf of it. So I was kind of just winging it. So I'm not sure if you guys have questions, direct questions, want them to go through a bit more of a presentation. Councilor Aubrey?
I have a question if no one's looking for more information. Thank you everyone for coming to present to us today. When this idea was presented to me, I thought it was a great idea. I love when we can look at care models that are distinctive to certain areas, because not all plans fit areas. So I do have a question regarding what the structure for the society needs to be. It sounds like there is a requirement there. Like, is there requirements for size, representation? Can we retool an existing committee to meet this requirement?
There is definitely a requirement of who be included. At the bare minimum, there needs to be the health authority, local physician representation, First Nations health authority, and First Nations communities if that's relevant and if they choose to participate. I think the hope in Tumbler Ridge is that we could use the committee that's already in place so that it's not more meetings for votes, since a lot of them will be fairly similar people. So there are likely some adjustments to the terms of reference that need to happen. And I think one that was notable is that council has the decision making on that committee, and I don't think the Ministry of Health would support council being able to veto the committee, for example, if they made a decision. So I think there would need to be some adjustments to the terms of reference, but it would be really great if we could use structures that are already in place where the people are already at the table, and it may just need to be expanded slightly or adjusted slightly just to prevent more meetings.
Dr. Helm?
Yeah, thank you, and apologize for arriving late. I tried on Zoom and I had a computer problem, so I've just come in person, so sorry about that. But just to try and give some further clarity from the local perspective, because Charleigh and Stacey have given like excellent background, but from our perspective, this it sort of originates through the division. It's largely physician driven. It's not really supposed to be acute care emergency. It's more primary care. So what can be done through the office or through allied health professionals and so on. It's more along those lines. And it's clear to me that the path ahead, if we want this to work, it's a long path, and it's not necessarily going to be easy, and there's no guarantee that it's going to work. But we are actually seeing progress being made as we're trying to advance, becoming a division and so on. We are seeing very encouraging progress. And the point is, as Stacey said, there's potentially new funding here. So let's just say, for example, this is just off the top of my head, let's say we form a committee and we decide that drug and alcohol is the big gap, which we're not doing a good job with. Then potentially we could apply and tell the regional committee and then access the funds to try and bring in an extra drug and alcohol professional. That's just one example of the kind of things we could do, but the committee would help determine what the main Tumbler Ridge needs are. And as Stacey and Charleigh said, there are regional needs as well. You've got to balance local versus regional, all of that. But our committee, through as wide a representation as possible, would be able to determine, what are the priorities for Tumbler Ridge. To be very honest with you, this is why I have not retired completely, and why I am still involved, because I see the potential here. And if we want to try, all of us are concerned about wanting the best healthcare as possible in Tumbler Ridge. And if we're really concerned about this is actually a way ahead that we can try and improve things for our community. And Melanie and I have been working on this. Other communities don't involve the mayor and council. They've just gone it alone and maybe have a communication from time to time. But I've always felt in Tumbler Ridge, we've done things differently. We've had this great working relationship between medical professionals and HSAs like Melanie and mayor and council. So why would Melanie and I want to try and invent something completely separate when we've got this sort of infrastructure which we can try to build upon. So the other thing is also just to look at Chetwynd and Dawson Creek, and I know Chetwynd is trying something similar with their mayor and council. I'm not quite sure about Dawson Creek, but yeah, my feeling would be that this committee or subcommittee, whatever we want to call it, it's sort of a means to an end, and all of us are terrified of another committee, but we have to just somehow try and make this work at a local level, because the potential advantages are just so enormous to Tumbler Ridge, and it's going to take work and a bit of a slog, but hopefully we're up to it.
And I totally agree with Dr. Helm. I know it came to the committee meeting that I actually was at, not the one I wasn't at. And to me, it makes total sense. We've been working, the task force has been working towards trying to find what we need and how to get it and how to solicit Northern Health or whoever the government to make sure we get some of these services back to Tumbler Ridge. Having part of say in that I think it's very important.
We used to have a committee called TRUC, Tumbler Ridge Umbrella Committee, and that was just a group of concerned citizens that said, let's try and do something for the community. This is similar in a way, but it's tied into regional and provincial and funding sources, which TRUC never was. So in a way it's similar, but in a way it's potentially much more powerful.
I totally agree. Any more questions from council? So I have talked with staff a bit, and this was previous after our health task force. And we knew we already looked at our terms of reference, and we would have to adjust that to come back to council. So I think we just need to. Sorry, I thought something. you have something?
I was just watching the lady on the screen with her dog and trying to get in there, so.
I just think it's got, something that comes back to council, that's council's wish is to put it as a subcommittee to the task force and then do terms of reference. If not, then council got to give direction to start up a new committee and get a terms of reference set. So I think we just need to work forward through that from council side and see where council wants to go with it. Councilor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor. I just, like Dr. Helm said, I think to make the health task force a subcommittee on this primary health care, I think would be a benefit because you don't lose anything when you have separate committees, and sometimes you lose in, communication. And you're wondering, are we both on the same page? I think if you make it into a subcommittee, I think you'll end up I think it'll work out better instead of forming a new committee. And like you said, and the same with Stacey, having more meetings is something that not everybody's looking for because we already have enough.
Councilor Jasinski?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Would there be any thoughts on dissolving the current health task force and then having the individuals that are sitting on that partake in the Southeast Primary Care Network meetings and have a whole new structure that way, instead of trying to mold and adjust what we have, which may not tailor to what this new primary care network would entail? Does that make any sense to, if that would be something that would happen or no?
Yeah, I think that the health task force still has work to do. Like, I think it's still a viable committee. We just talked about doing it as a subcommittee, being that if this is what council would want, we could bring the terms of reference back and add that piece into the terms of reference. And then what happens is, we don't we talked a bit at the health task, how we would start the meetings first in regards to this. And maybe it's the first couple of meetings are directed totally on this new subcommittee. And then it's not like you have to meet that is much right away, and then when you need to have a meeting, you bring it in on that subcommittee. To me, that the health task force still has say, and we're still working through with Northern Health. We're getting things, and that presentation that's coming from Northern Health. I think a lot of that comes from the health task force. Like we're working with Northern Health and the health task force that Melanie will be presenting later. That's some of that stuff that's on there is from when Councillor House sat on that committee, and some of the steps and some of the things they've achieved so far. So I don't think you could dissolve that. That's my thought. That's up to council. It's council committee. It's not a subcommittee. Dr. Helm?
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Nadzinski, through. I think the task force is a lot of what we deal with at the task force is acute care, emergency services, and so on. And Stacey can correct me here, but my understanding for this committee we're talking about here is more primary care and less acute care, emergency, etc. And so if we just formed the new committee, then we wouldn't really have a vehicle to discuss acute care as I see it. So we just have to work out how best to do it. But we want to be able to talk about everything. And the new committee is what potentially opens up funding opportunities. That's the bottom line. Funding opportunities for Tumbler Ridge for new positions to work maybe out of the clinic or in the health centre, wherever. That's the sort of the carrot. Yeah.
I think there would be an opportunity to section off the meeting as well. We would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that acute care affects primary care and primary care affects acute care, particularly in rural communities. Having the same committee, but having it sectioned off to discuss different things or a subcommittee of the committee, I think would be perfectly reasonable. I think it's just important that the decision-making is left to that committee on the resources. And then also, the only thing I wanted to add to Dr. Helm's presentation earlier is that the PCN is built around team-based care. And I think that any of us in small local communities can understand the importance and impact of allied health working with physicians to get the whole spectrum of healthcare, which, as remote communities, we don't necessarily always get in that same way as a large urban center. But I don't think that there's a need to create a whole new committee, but I think, there's some minor tweaks to the terms of reference or a subcommittee that, just adds to the terms of reference to ensure that it meets the mandates of the province in terms of primary care networks. But I think that acute care and primary care are kind of hand in hand in small communities, and each impacts each other. So having the same people at the same time is probably not a bad idea.
Appreciate those comments. Any other questions from council? All right, I guess it'll be just something we'll chat later with staff and bring it back or something. I just know it's not on our agenda to talk about the terms of reference, but I think we can give that direction tonight to have them come back up and we can relook at the terms of reference for that task force and then we can go from there. Does that make sense? All right, well, thank you very much, Charlie and Stacey and Dr. Helm. Thank you.
And if staff want to reach out to me, they're welcome to do that in terms of what the mandate is under the funding, so.
Okay, I appreciate that. I believe staff have your name. Yep. Okay, I appreciate that, Stacey. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and thank you, Melanie, for letting us take your spot. I'm off to coach volleyball now.
Thank you, and sorry about my Great Dane trying desperately to make an appearance for everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. All right, 4.2 is going to be Northern Health. Melanie Maracle with Health Service Administrator via Zoom regarding the Tumbler Northern Health Services. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Is it okay if I utilize this share screen tool so that I can show my PowerPoint as I'm going through it?
Yep. Staff will do it now.
Best. Okay. Let me know, can everyone see it okay?
Yep.
Okay. Just gonna slideshow. Alrighty. Okay, so I wanted to, give a bit of an overview of some of the changes that have been going on at the Tumbler Ridge Health Center. And I had made this presentation earlier to Daryl and Councillor Lehman, and they thought it would be good that I did the same presentation for all of the councillor members. So I'm just going to get straight into it, but if anyone has any questions, please speak up as I'm going through so that you don't lose your train of thought. So first off, one of the things that I think is a success for us is that we have had for quite a while 3 general practitioners or family physicians in our community. We have one that will be retiring in 2022. However, we were successful in recruiting a new physician, Claire Lenoble. I'm hoping, Charles, I pronounced that accurately. If not, you can jump in later. She will be starting in August. And so that will be, I think, a good compliment to the community, because we did have her come out and do a tour. Mayor Bertrand came out for that, and so did various members of the community to meet with her, and that went so well that we were able to recruit her. So while we have one physician unfortunately leaving, we do have another one coming in. We have also traditionally had Becky Borton, which perhaps some of you may have met with her along the way, as a practice support coach, so working predominantly with the physicians and making improvements in the primary care clinic and the flow. And so she has done some great work. One of the things they worked on, I would say roughly around 10 months, 8 months ago, was taking a look at our wait times. And so they were doing, with Lisa Johnson, the office coordinator, they were making some changes to ensure that we have appropriate physician availability for people in the community if they wanted same-day appointments. And so the work that had been done there has, to my knowledge, made some improvements. Every time I've had some complaints come forward and individuals saying that it was a long wait time to see a physician, every time that I've actually looked at the wait times, it's been no more than 2 weeks, which is actually pretty good for wait times for physicians. And many times the clinic wait time was less than a week. So I think we've made some positive gains there within the community. And then we also now have, that's new since COVID, is the virtual clinic that's 10 to 10. That allows people, if, for example, they need prescriptions refilled, instead of trying to see their primary care physician, they're able to utilize this virtual clinic to have things like prescriptions filled. So I think that's another success that is available to the residents of Tumbler Ridge. And then we have also gone through a redesign of our IPT team and our space. So what we do have now is when people come in for like wound care or IV therapies, IV antibiotics, instead of utilizing an emergency room space, we now have 2 clinical spaces available that the nursing staff can book for people to come in and have their care be taken in that area as opposed to emerge. So there's less waiting around for them because there's a dedicated space for those types of services as opposed to trying to utilize our emergency department. So those are some of the successes that we have seen over the last year, and some of them previously, but into this year as well. We continue to have challenges with access. In particular, I'm sure it's not new to council that access for after-hours care will continue to be an issue. And that's a challenge we're still looking at, trying to see how we can ameliorate that. And then another thing for us, and in particular the physicians, Becky Borton has resigned from her position as a practice support coach. And as far as I'm aware, that position will not be filled in the same capacity as before. They will be utilizing practice support coaches from other communities to help the physicians in Tumbler Ridge. But Becky is staying with Northern Health. She has taken on a position with the Organizational Development Department, and in particular, she is now the Psychological Health and Wellness Advisor for the organization. And so I think that's a win for really the Northeast, in particular Tumbler and Chetwynd, because Becky is so familiar with those communities. As I'm sure you would understand with COVID, I think mental health has really come to the forefront of understanding that that's an important thing to be aware of, and it's also important to be aware of for our healthcare professionals. Recruitment-wise, we have 3 RN positions as well as a 0.8 FTE clinical practice lead. It was a team leader position, but I was able to get it increased. It's a step up into a clinical practice lead. That position is filled. We have one of the RN positions filled with Anne, that I'm sure many of you know. And then we have, we were hoping to do a new rotation to change it to 0.8 FTE so that we could get a new RN to the community. We have been successful. One of the nurses that we have coming here through agencies, she has decided to leave agency work and has signed up with what we call the Northern Health Travel Resource Pool. And she will specifically, she has been hired into that position as a 0.5 FTE, and she specifically will be working shifts in Tumbler Ridge through that resource pool. So we're creating, with this new initiative through Northern Health, we're allowing travel nurses to take on positions that are then through Northern Health, so they then are able to get the vacation, the benefits, all the types of things that they wouldn't be able to have as a travel nurse. And so we have been able to recruit someone as a 0.5 FTE. So she will then utilize the Northern Health scheduling system to pick the weeks and months that she wants to come work in the community. And Northern Health will fly her in as a Northern Health employee. And so that's, I think, something that has been a new change for us in trying to recruit staff. And then we also have a regular staff member who has a full-time line in Dawson Creek taking regular shifts in Tumbler Ridge. So while we continue to have to use agency, I do think we're starting to build some momentum within the community where we have a close-knit team of nurses, both Northern Health as well as agency. We have a group of agency nurses, around 4, that regularly come back to the community over and over again, and that too helps build sort of the team environment that I think is very beneficial to the community as well, because they get to know the community, the people, their histories, and so that's one of the things that we have going on. We also have, as of recently, there is a local LPN, licensed practical nurse, who lives in the community, who we have now picked up. We haven't in the past had LPN lines, but because we have had such a hard time recruiting RNs, we are now utilizing her very regularly and filling some of the community work that the nurses do, and I think that's another benefit that we've had. Also, we had a medical lab assistant vacancy that was vacant as of September, but we were able to increase that position to a full, almost full-time position, and we were able to recruit a candidate from Ontario whose partner works for the mine. So now they've been reunited with a position, and so she started in January. The only reason why she isn't working full-time is there's childcare issues, and so we've tailored her shifts to meet the childcare needs so that she can continue working as much as possible. We also have had a success in filling our second diagnostic imaging or X-ray tech. Historically, we only had one position of a 0.5 FTE, but we were able to increase our budget to a full-time, having 2 part-time staff, allowing the 1 staff member not to work 24/7, 365 days a year with the on-call portion. Unfortunately, the second line that we filled, that staff member took a relief position. It was a Northern Health staff member, took a relief position in another community. So we're actively recruiting to fill that relief position. And just today, I was able to find that we have a few applicants that I'm going to go forward and interview in the next coming weeks. So stay tuned. We hope to be able to have that position filled in short order as well. Oops, why is it skipping a page? Okay, so challenges. Already talked about the recent challenges with BCEHS, so we're continuing to work on that. The latest that I have heard from BCEHS is that we had some communication issues that were coming out specifically from the Kamloops Dispatch Center. Some of the dispatchers were not aware of the change, and then that was causing some miscommunication between BC Dispatch and our nurse on call. We think we've ironed that out, so I think we're moving in a positive direction there. Continue to have the RN vacancies. However, as I mentioned, we have had some successes in sort of reducing that pressure within the community. Our respiratory therapist position that we had filled for about 9 months before the individual left to go back to the lower mainland, we were not successful in recruiting locally to either Tumbler Ridge or Chetwynd. So Northern Health has made the executive decision to move that budget to Dawson Creek with the hopes of it being a larger center that we might be able to recruit an RT, but the RT would continue to commute to the communities of Tumbler Ridge and Chetwynd to help support the needs of the community. So while the position is moved, the person would still support, like our last RT did, both communities. So that wouldn't change. And then we already talked about that this last bullet, we were able to successfully recruit a medical lab assistant. Tumbler Ridge Services, again, success. We were able to, it says nurse in charge, but it's a clinical practice lead. So Andrea's role helps fill emerge needs if we need it. But then she also does what I would term administrative functions like educating the nurses, making sure that we do simulations, and then she's also helping sort of in the day-to-day function of the health center when it comes to care needs within the community. We were able to successfully hire occupational therapist, which I understand has been a great success for both communities. She is able to do case management. She's able to go into people's homes and do assessments in order to help them stay within the community by having the right tools and resources. And then we also have just recently had a physiotherapist reach out to the community wanting to come back to Chetwynd. She's a Chetwynd, from Chetwynd, just finishing up this year the physiotherapy program, and we're going to look at having a position where she will work part-time in Chetwynd, part-time in Tumbler Ridge to support the needs from a physiotherapy perspective. So that is a service that hopefully, knock on wood, will be coming to the community sometime soon, probably in the springtime when she's done her program. We continue to work with our community paramedics in collaboration. They do attend our interdisciplinary team. And as earlier noted by both Troy and Daryl, this is an integral function within the community because it allows us to, as Northern Health, understand if people's conditions within the community are changing or whether they should be coming in to be seen by the physician. So on a weekly basis, we collaborate with the community paramedic to see how the residents are doing. And another thing that we've been doing a lot more of, especially since COVID, is utilizing real-time virtual supports. And this is, again, a function that's available to the physicians and the nurses, as well as community members. So things like virtual dermatology is an option now. So that's another success that we now have. Some of the challenges we only have one full-time social worker / mental health clinician in Tumbler Ridge. We have seen an increase in the need for this service, and the individual in this role has been quite overwhelmed, in particular over the last 6 months. So we're doing some work to try and maybe have some of the mental health component from this individual be transferred for those who are already doing virtual visits with her to maybe do virtual visits with our clinician in Chetwynd instead, so that we don't have as long of a wait time. Again, we continue to have vacancies with the RN. We also have some challenges in home support. Mostly in trying to understand what needs are required in the community. So we have applied for a grant through BC Quality Council, where we're hoping to hire a local student, either from Chetwynd or Tumbler Ridge, to do a review of all of our home support clients so that we can have a better understanding of what the needs are in the community. And then hoping out of this grant, if we were able to get it, hoping that we could then advocate for more support within both communities from Northern Health to say, hey, we need more home support workers. So that's something we're working towards. And then we had hoped that we would have a new physiotherapist in January here in the community, as we did have a new physician who came to Chetwynd. Unfortunately, the physician's partner decided that she liked her private practice too much to take on a role with Northern Health. So now we're actively recruiting this local student who will be graduating to hopefully take on this role in the springtime. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the nursing and physician hours when it comes to after-hours care within the community. Because I know that there was some concern with the changes in BCEHS and the after-hours on call. With that change, I did pull some numbers, and you'll note that over time, within the community of Tumbler Ridge, the after-hours use of the emergency department has reduced dramatically. So I think this is just to highlight that the way the after-hours clinic is being utilized and accessed has been changing over the years, and it's not just due to the changes in the CEHS. And then this data is not, this I pulled back in November, but the new data for Tumbler Ridge is that first doses is now at 78%. The last time I looked, I can't recall what the second doses are, but the third doses I think is now up to 35% for the booster doses in the community. And you'll note, just generally speaking, Tumbler Ridge is one of the highest in immunization rates that we have, and we are now doing both booked and walk-ins. It's still on Thursdays from 9 to 4, but the numbers have been greatly reducing on the number of people coming into the clinic for vaccination over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 weeks. So those who wanted vaccines, I guess the moral of the story is they've gotten it. And then just distribution in COVID numbers. Again, this is a little bit older because this was back in January, but the numbers, I would say, in the South Piece are still slightly increasing, whereas in other communities, they're already seeing a downward trend. And then one of the things that was asked of us a while back was, sorry, is there a question?
Nope.
Okay, one of the things that was asked a while back was to try and get a better understanding of the exit interviews that are done. Because the number is so small for Chetwynd in particular, what our recruitment department did was they pulled the numbers, and this was from September 1st, 2019 to September 30th of 2021. They pulled the exit interviews for the Northeast. And so you'll notice the number one reason why many people were leaving was for personal or family reasons. And I would say when I talk to staff who are choosing to leave, this is congruent with what I'm seeing. Our last medical lab assistant who left Tumbler Ridge was leaving for family reasons, not because she didn't like Tumbler Ridge or didn't like the work, but family reasons was pulling her away. The next highest is recruitment, and then after that it's other, which isn't helpful, but there's always a category of other when you're doing these types of things. And so I'll let everyone else sort of take a look at the smaller numbers. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the prototype for the rural retention incentive. So Northern Health has recognized for a number of years that it's harder to retain people within the North. And so for around 2 years, Northern Health has been talking with the Ministry of Health on how can we incentivize our staff to stay. And I know that this has been something that Council has been talking about as well. And so recently we are doing a pilot. The communities that are involved are all of the Northeast communities in this pilot, along with Houston and Prince Rupert. And all of the regulated healthcare professionals are part of this incentive. So any Northern Health employee who is hired either in a part-time or full-time capacity is able to participate in this incentive. And for Tumbler Ridge, the incentive is $1,200 for a full-time employee for staying within the community within that quarter. So it's a quarterly function. So the first payout for staff who worked January 1st to December 31st of 2021 occurred for most of the staff last paycheck. And then the pilot will also include January 1st to March 31st. And again, at $1,200 if the person worked within a full-time capacity. And it's our way of trying to incentivize people to hold full-time, part-time, permanent positions as opposed to working casual, because a large number of staff over the last number of years with COVID have chosen to do casual instead. So we're trying to incentivize staff to stay with us and to hold permanent lines. And so we'll have to stay tuned and see how the pilot goes and see what the Ministry of Health says after the fact. So then outstanding work, and this is my last slide, I believe. Some of the things that I already talked about that we want to look at is looking at the home support model and really understanding the needs both in Tumbler Ridge and in Chetwynd, and seeing if we need to change either number of staff, hours of day, days of week, for example. I also want to take a look at, and this is something I've been working on, is trying to look at, do we need a different model of care? Do we need extended hours, whether it's to the emergency department or primary care? So this is on my radar to look at in this coming calendar year. And then also I want to take a look at the occupational therapist. We've had her for about 6 months and trying to see, are we best utilizing her? So these are the things that will be reviewed in the coming calendar year. And then lastly, one of the things that's still outstanding but will occur this coming week is our redesign of space at the center. So many of you may know that the South Peace Community Services, if I'm getting it right, has some space that they utilize within the center. We want to still continue to have health services and community services in the center, but we would like to, they'll be moving into a different area of the Tumbler Ridge Health Center, and we will be taking over that space as in Northern Health for our new baby clinics, our immunizations, our OT, any visiting specialist, and our social worker will move into the space that they used to have, because we feel that's a better use of people coming into that space, because currently they wait in emerge. So we kind of have all these people who are really looking to have more of primary care type functions happening, waiting with emerge people. And we didn't think that really worked well, so we'll have 2 separate waiting areas, those who are waiting for emerge, those who are waiting for primary care functions, and we think that that will create a better flow for the residents when they're coming to our center, and that we will be doing those moves this Thursday and Friday. And I think that takes me to the very end of my presentation. Any questions?
All right, thank you very much, Melanie. Council, any questions? Councilor Rudy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Scott. Thank you, Ms. Maracle, for presenting to us. It's great to hear what you're all doing, and I really like the talking about successes and challenges, and you know, really like how you've addressed some of the issues that we presented in terms of staffing, and you found some unique ways to address our concerns about bringing more staff members to town, and I'm excited about having physio. My first question for you is, you mentioned earlier in the presentation about accessing virtual clinics, like for medication and what have you. How can someone access those?
It's a 1-800 number, if I recall correctly. I don't have it in front of me, but I'd be happy to have as an action item. Maybe I'll provide to Daryl or Councillor Lehman, or actually maybe even Jennifer, the phone number, so that would then be available for people who might not know about it.
Yeah, you can just supply that number to staff, to Jennifer Thomas or Ms. Thompson.
That's what I'll do.
Any other questions, Councilor Rudy?
I have a few, but I'll give it an opportunity.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so my next one for you is, can can you describe the option, like the method and option for patient complaints and concerns? Yeah.
So our first method, and I know I have provided this in the past, first option is to directly have complainants talk with the provider that they have a complaint with. Our hope is that it can be resolved right at the time or near the time of the issue. If not, then what we've suggested is that people can complain directly to me and or to Andrea Amati, who's the new clinical practice lead, because she's on site 4 days a week. I'm on site only 2 days. And so that's another avenue that people have utilized within the community, so that we can't fix what we don't know. That's my motto. So if people feel comfortable going forward that way, then I'm happy to talk to people, meet with people, as is Andrea. If the complaint ends up being directed towards a physician, then I can't actually address that. It does then go up to Dr. Temple, who's the medical director for the Northeast, and then she would then address that type of complaint. And then lastly, if after having gone through those various options that I just mentioned, if people are still feeling like their complaint hasn't been appropriately addressed, then we have our patient concerns department that it can go to that way as well. And then as some of the counselors may be aware, sometimes counselors have complaints that go directly to them. And so in the past, some counselors have emailed me directly with concerns, which I've tried to address as expeditiously as possible, keeping in mind that if I haven't spoken to the person directly, I can only give answers that are general in nature. But that is another way that I'm happy to also continue to utilize that method if it seems to work for members of the community.
Councilor?
Thank you, Ms. Maracle. And the reason why I asked that is because, just for everyone's information, like I have gone through that method of addressing a person's complaint and forwarding along to you, but I just wanted clarity to make sure that that was an appropriate method and I could forward people along that avenue. Because, yeah, in the past I've been told that people should go to the website, and I mean, as you said, I think you said it really well, and that you don't know the problem until somebody brings it to you, so I really appreciate that.
Any other questions from the council?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
We've been having problems with the phone system, and I'm not sure if this has been brought to your attention about people phoning in and there's no answer. Now, I've experienced this myself, and it's not just like, oh, the automated messaging system comes on, that's just the voicemail and they hang up. Like, you wait to the very end, and it says, please hold for whatever, and then nothing happens. And I know this is absolutely during open hours, and it's persisted over multiple days. Have you had any success in this area on overcoming that phone management system?
No, I really appreciate the question, and yes, I am aware of it. It's very odd that this has happened. I don't know what's causing it. We have escalated it to our IT department, as we believe it actually has something to do with the IT background functions. I have also heard that after the phone upgrades, this similar gremlin has happened at other smaller diagnostic and treatment centers. So I am also trying to work with some of those other sites to understand what they may have done to try and fix this. We have exhausted everything that we think we can do at our site level. So I want to say that we are aware of the problem. We're trying our best to address it, but it has escalated sort of to a corporate IT level at this point.
Still got some more. Thank you for that response. I mean, I deal with technology every day, and sometimes you just got to bump up the line. So you touched on the social worker and the mental health component. You spoke to potentially having some options and ideas. Is there any options for having like a part-time person come in or a traveling mental support counselor come in? I also share concerns from the mental health aspect of our community, and it's one thing getting virtual care, but receiving care in person, you see so much more in terms of physical cues, and you get so much more from seeing the person in person. Is there any option to like share somebody in the region or bring someone in occasionally once or twice a month, that sort of thing?
Mental health supports and social workers in particular are just as hard to find as RNs are. So I know that in the Northeast we have a number of open vacancies that we're actively trying to recruit for. Our Director of Specialized Services, who mental health and addictions falls under, has been making many, many positive changes throughout the Northeast to try and help address mental health and addictions that I think you will find over time will probably make a difference. In particular, the child and youth mental health, we're seeing an increase there. So there are some contracted services that she's been able to put into place at Dawson Creek as well as Fort St. John. So when youth are having mental health crisis, they're unable to stay within smaller communities and they have to be transported to a larger site, which are called designated facilities. So now whenever youth are transported out of the community, whether it's Tumbler, Ridge, or Chetwynd, they now are seen by these youth mental health clinicians and are able to start working towards their care plan right away as they're seen and emerge. And so that's a new thing, relatively new, I think, as of October or November. So still have to see if that change is going to have a positive impact because it is quite new. But that is one of the things we've put in place at Northern Health to try and help. And I do recognize that you're absolutely correct that in person is better for some people, but I think that's where we're trying to utilize an increase in funding for a mental health clinician in Chetwynd, which used to be a 0.5 FTE. We've now raised it to a 1 FTE, so a full-time position. But we're going to utilize her to kind of try and help take over some of the virtual care that the individual in Tumbler Ridge has been providing so that we're freeing up her calendar to help support the community members where she may have not had enough space previously. So I think, again, I think we're baby stepping it forward. Are we there yet? I don't believe we are. But again, we're having a hard time in recruitment and retention overall for mental health as well as social worker positions across Northern Health. I hope that helps to address your question. If not, please ask.
No, that's reasonable. Thank you. I understand it's a process.
Anybody else from council have questions? I do, but Councilor Weir, go ahead. I got a couple. Go ahead, Councilor Weir.
Sorry, we got somebody directly here we can ask these questions to, so I really appreciate your time. You talked about targeted funding for recruitment and retention of healthcare professionals. In your experience in the past, has this been a successful method for attracting professionals to our community?
So what I talked about was sort of targeted funding to continue to retain people that we already have, but we do have specific to nurses, our rural recruitment nursing incentive, which is a $10,000 3-year return on service. We have found that this has been great to recruit people for Northern Health. And not that I have the numbers, But, so the number I'm about to put out there is a total assumption and guess on my part, and we know what happens when we make assumptions and guesses, so don't hold me to it. But I think generally speaking, Northern Health as a whole has found that we're able to retain a good portion of people who have come to the community with that incentive, but that doesn't mean we're able to retain all of them. Most of the time we're able to retain those who are looking to leave for at least the 3 years because they don't want to have to pay anything back. But if their plan was to sort of have the 10,000 to help pay off some loans, then they stay for the 3 years and then they're gone. So does it work for everyone to keep them? No, but it does work for some because I think an important thing, which is accurate information, is that Northern Health's data says that if we're able to keep someone for over the 3-year mark, the data shows that they're most likely to stay for a much longer time. So it's that 3-year cutoff. If people are here for at least 3 years, they're likely to continue to stay, but before that 3-year, we see a high turnover rate in employees.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. I actually just want to make a few comments. I was over at with BCM, giving them their passes, and we had quite the chat there in regards to Northern Health and nurses and stuff. And I just want council to be aware and staff how appreciated those group of people over there are. That's all the talk is right now, not only from the BCM service side, but the nurses. So the agency nurse that you mentioned about how she's leaving an agency and signing on through Northern Health, my understanding it has lots to do with the passes, with the golf and swimming and community center usage and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm going to say, Councillor Howe came up with that idea. And to me, we're already starting to see stuff come back from that. There is so much talk over at your facility about in regards to the passes and how much it's appreciated. And I think that's a great tool for recruitment and retention. BCM's employees over there that are putting it on the BCM's websites right now. So I think it's going to help out both groups. So.
And you know what? You're absolutely right. One of the most recent agency nurses who regularly comes up to the site was able to get one of the passes, Joy, and she too had said that she felt like this should be all over our recruitment pages as well because she was very appreciative and happy about it. So yes, it's being talked about very much at the center.
That's good. And Councillor, already hit a lot of the questions I had written down. The phone line, I think, even in regards to the phone line, can we change the answering part of it, the message on there stating that you are having phone problems? I know Councillor Lehman had sent off some emails to yourself in regards to residents calling him, but we're hearing it. We talk about it at every health task force meeting in regards to the phone. Is there a way of changing your message there to make sure people are aware that we are having, or you are having issues over there? Just so they know they should keep calling back or maybe drive down if they need an appointment that bad.
Great suggestion, and I will look into it. One of the things when we really started seeing this as being a problem that I learned from Lisa, who is our clinic coordinator, is that IT, when we made the change, did not give her the PIN access to be able to change the messages. So in order for us to make this change, I have to do an IT request and go through that whole rigmarole. So I just wanted everyone to know I definitely will bring it forward, but it will not be an overnight change because I have some red tape to go through.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, any other questions by council? Councillor Howe.
This is to our staff. Where are we at with our retention bonus for nurses that we talked about a year ago? Where are we at with that?
I believe that's Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. A report will be coming to council in the very near future to discuss addition to the operating budget.
And is Melanie aware of what we're talking about?
Yeah, she's shaking her head. Yes, she looks like she's well aware of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been talked about at the health task force as well. So. Okay, any other questions by council? Okay, well, thanks very much, Melanie, for joining us today and your presentation.
And I want to thank everyone for your time and allowing me to attend to let you know what we've done in the last year. I very much appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening, and happy Valentine's Day.
Have a good night. Reports, 5.1 snow clearing policy. It was requested by council to bring forward to the policy of the first meeting for January 17th. And moving for discussion. Seconder, Councilor Milbury, all in favor? Carried. Does anybody want to start? Oh, yeah, I actually have a couple of questions and stuff, and I mean, it's more directed to Ms. Thompson. To me, in regard to having this report in front of us, I hope staff is prepared to freely talk about it.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I noticed, and I mean, it's on page 23 of the 54, and I've had this discussion with Ms. Thompson already, and that's in regards to the sidewalks along Willow Drive. Half down on the page, sidewalks along Willow Drive will be cleared and sanded prior to 8 a.m. on school days. Is staff aware of this in the policy? Ms. Thompson, is staff aware of it?
Thank you. Until you had brought it to my attention, staff were under the understanding it was just a practice and that it wasn't in policy, and that is with the changeover in the staff that we do have. And staff can provide a report to council on, how many times that we have gone out and the staffing, but 90% of what is occurring on Willow Drive is we didn't seem to have too many issues until the freeze and thaw after Christmas, and that's when we need to get out more, but we do have data if council would appreciate seeing that we can send anything out to everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons I brought that forward was I just noticed it wasn't. I mean, obviously I'm going to talk to you, but I just knew it was in the policy part. I just want to make sure with the changeover and with training that we're aware of it, that is one of the priorities before school. Okay, anything else from council? Councilor Lehman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think this year there was some complaints about our snow removal, which is, I mean, we get complaints even though we have excellent snow removal as far as I'm concerned, but there were a few days this year where I think we were maybe lacking, but I think part of the problem is because the district is training new staff on different equipment, but I think what we were remiss in doing is maybe letting the people know that there's training going on, so that, be patient. You can't become proficient in a new piece of equipment overnight, and I think that's maybe something we need to look at, not just back, but I think in the future, just so that people are aware that, our staff is doing the best that they can, but being new also has an impact on the effectiveness of removing the snow.
So one reason this was brought forward, at a regular meeting to bring it up to the PNP, and to have some discussion in regards to the shutdown of snow removal. Can't remember the weather months or whatever that was, and I think there needs to be some changes made to the policy. I understand when staff read the policy or followed the policy, it was, they used the wording in here is weather. No stipulation where, it was -40 or whatever it was at the time. To me, staff did it to protect equipment, I believe is what we found out at the meeting. That's, to me, is why we brought it back here to have this discussion. If we want to make a change, do we need to reword some of it to make sure that it's clear in regards to the policy? And I think that's what happens when we brought forward the policy, had a pretty good discussion to build the policy with staff at the time. We added a lot of things to the policy back then. And I think now's the time to go through it, and if there's changes we need to make or there's additions we need to add in there so it's clear, clear from council side and clear for staff to go through it, understand what we're looking for in the policy, get the feedback from their side, and then make the changes. That to me is why it's in front of us. Councillor Helm?
Yeah, so the way I understood it, it was -30 out, and we were told that it's too cold for our equipment to go out and plow roads. So to me, it's back to staff. If minus 30 is now the new normal for us not plowing roads, then we need to put that in the policy, or we need to change things so that we can plow beyond minus 30. So ambulances and fire departments and the RCMP don't shut down when it gets minus 30. They still need to get around our community. I don't understand why we shut down at minus 30. It's never happened before in Tumbler Ridge, as far as I've ever seen. And then when it happened, that everything was chalked up to minus 30. Well, it gets colder than minus 30 here. So I'd like to hear from staff, what are we going to do about it? Is that the number? Is it going to be minus 40 or what? The way I understand it, our plow trucks and our graders can sit in a completely warm, set up shop, plugged in, ready to go. They got to go out for a 4-hour run, come back in, plug them in at lunchtime, and go back out for another 4 hours. If we can't operate in minus 30, we've got an issue there. And did we buy the wrong equipment? Maybe we did. But I'd like to hear what it is.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. In regard to the policy, we do rely, if you look on page 22 that was provided, it does state maintenance will be carried out as indicated in this document with consideration for the weather. And from my understanding, I have only been here about 16 months, but it is, this wasn't the only time that it happened. It happened in the past. And also in my experience, even in Saskatchewan, we don't go out onto the roads in minus 30 unless it is an emergency. But I will have Mr. Oliver and Mr. Lowther respond with the previous practice and their expertise on the situation. Mr. Oliver?
Well, it has been previous practice for years. It's hard on equipment, hydraulic lines freeze up, they break. Doug has more on the mechanical side.
Ever since I've been here, this is one of my 10th year, we used to, same thing. Same thing, we used to, unless it was an emergency.
So what's the number? Is it minus 30? What's the number?
Previous to, that's what we were directed, was minus 30. We didn't go out, unless there was really slippery, deep snow, walkways around the seniors, access downtown. It was just, lack of better words, common sense. If you didn't have to, don't go. This year, I think there was 3 days that we didn't go out. And we did send the plow truck out. We sent the sidewalk machine out and the grader out. During the coldest parts, we did experience about $4,500 in repairs for those 3 days on those 3 pieces of equipment. I don't know if it's, and it's a whole wide range of makes and models of the equipment, from John Deere to Cat. Actually, Cat has a cold weather protection, so it won't allow you to go out of first gear. It won't let the hydraulics work until it reaches a certain operating temperature. So this year, it sat for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days during the coldest snap. It warmed up to about minus 28. We fired it up. It had to idle at high idle for about an hour and then drove around the lot, like in the backyard, trying to use it. Took about an hour for it to reach up to tranny temperature and hydraulic temperature so we could go down the road to do the fire department, actually. So the John Deere, not so much. The John Deere doesn't have that same thing. It's just nothing comes up to operating temperature for quite a while of operation. Most private businesses have been shutting down after minus 30 because they noticed that the cost. I know mines and oil field. Actually, I used to manage a couple different oil field companies too in fleets, and 200 and 300 pieces of equipment. And same thing, even in the oil field where there's a lot of money, they would weigh their options and put out what they really had to put out. So I guess care and control and just protection of the funds. We weren't trying to do anything other than just common sense and make sure. The lead hand was going out and checking problem areas where they know that people walk. There wasn't a lot of foot traffic out when it was that cold spell either, and so we just felt that was the right thing to do. Even with the stuff we did send out, like I said, we did experience breakdowns. So, and that's on new equipment. It's not like it's older. It was fairly new equipment.
Exactly.
So they're not putting good hoses on the new equipment anymore. It's they say they're cold weather rated, and they're it's not quite the same.
Councillor, go ahead.
Sorry, just one question that was asked that we didn't respond to is, of our equipment, how much of it is able to be within heated building versus sitting outside in the weather?
Sorry about that. We have our Vector and steamer sit inside because they're water, and even when we drain them and put the antifreeze in them, we still end up with issues. So Vector and the steamer are always parked inside. Our sand truck is parked inside, and the usually one loader, whatever loader can service the sand truck so that we can put sand out during bad times. Nothing else fits inside in the heated shop. All of the equipment is plugged in outside, but even the new cat loader, the old John Deere grader, even when it's plugged in and they put a cab heater in it, they don't start easily. Like we had a lot of problems this year with all International Cat and John Deere. It's even plugged in.
Do you follow up, Council?
I mean, I don't know, if we bought the wrong equipment, then it is what it is, maybe that's on us, but, I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Lowther's assessment on equipment and, what can and cannot be used. I don't see why a piece of equipment can't be kept warm in the shop and ran for 4 hours and come back in. Your hydraulics are moving, your hydraulics are operating, they stay warm. Minus 30 isn't, in my mind, that cold. But what I'm saying is if we need to put a number in our policy. If it's minus 30 and we're not gonna move anything, then great. Or if it's minus 40, we don't move anything, great. But if we have to maintain a certain level of accessibility in the community when we have snow. That period was really, really bad. It was in early January. It was cold, but it wasn't excessively cold for Tumbler Ridge, and we had a lot of snow. And people were complaining. People couldn't get around in cars. People are stuck on the hills in little cars. They can't get around the community. So all I'm saying is if we have something in the policy, the next council can come in and look at it, and the next time we have this in the winter, we can decide if this works for us or not. Just to me, I can't see why we can't have a plow truck parked in there that can go out, run around, and do all the roads. At least the main corridors. I know Mr. Lowther seems to think that they were done at that time. We had extensive conversations in here over a couple of meetings, a lot of emails, and they weren't done during that period. And that was the excuse that was given, is that it was cold weather related. And to me, it wasn't even that cold out during that time. I just want to make sure that we put something in writing in here that, if it's minus 40 is the end all, we don't operate any equipment, put something in the policy. Don't leave it open-ended that, we'll determine if it's weather and we won't operate. 10 years down the road, it'll be minus 25. We don't operate at minus 25. Put a number in here that we can live by, work by, and I mean, that's the update that I'd be looking for in the policy.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need. I mean, I understand why staff would use weather, and then they determine the temp or whatever way they decide on it when they have the terminology and then the weather. And I think we need to change it. And it is for staff side, but also for council, because that's what we gave direction by it. The weather term in there, I thought something totally different. When the streets were flooded, once they don't send out the plow, you're gonna need an icebreaker, right? So that's what I thought about weather. And I actually spoke with Ms. Thompson about that when it first happened. But I know staff had some answers there, so my staff.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. We did go, I know staff was out on high priority roads. It was the Monday of the long weekend. And I actually went out with the lead hand that was on call that day. And we drove the roads and I did direct them to go with the sand truck and the trucks that they had that were warm up to clean the high priority roads that day. And then it was the Tuesday and it kind of stayed cold and that, but Mr. Lowther also has the snow events and the accumulation information if council would like that.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lowther?
We do, for care and control and liability, we keep a monitoring record, so it shows what days we go out, the temperature, and what equipment. Councillor Howe, we do have like the sand truck that parks inside and that loader. So the sand truck was out every day. There might have been one day in the morning that it didn't go out, but for the care and control, we do monitor what equipment does go out. We try to send equipment out every day. There was the one day that it was really cold and they didn't go out until the afternoon. But the lead hand went around and was checking the roads and certain problem areas just to see. And the feedback that we got back from that was mainly drifting. But the snow events, we didn't get much for snow. It was mainly drifting. And it did drift in a lot of areas, and certain areas, it was weird areas too, so. We do, the stuff that can park inside, but even that sand truck froze up and the blade wouldn't go after 4 hours. And the sander, if you're just plowing, the sand will freeze up. So it's a challenge, but if a person does put a temperature in the policy and then you get an emergency dump, then how do you override the policy too?
Councilor Howell, Councilor Milgram, and Councilor Howell. Yeah, I mean, I think whether you set a number or have that, something in there explaining it. But my other question was, I believe we've seen it in the email, is there things that we can buy or look at in regards to budget discussions, in regards to snow removal, whether it's, different heaters for some of the equipment that a district owns, whether it be the plow, whether it be the graders, whatever it is, the stuff that can't park inside. I know you only have so much room over indoors and heated, but I believe there was something sent out by staff in regards that, there could be this bot or that bot or this bot that could help. If that's the case, if that did come out, I believe I did receive from staff. I'm not sure if anybody else in council did. I'm pretty sure I received something in an email. Okay, somebody else has. So maybe there's an option there to have that in the budget discussion. If it's something that can be used from staff side to be able to use the equipment at -30 or -35, there's less harm to the equipment that's owned by the district or whatever. I'd like to, I believe I have the email, and maybe Councilor Howard does too, and can send it back to staff. Councilor Milgram.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So if we're looking at adding something to the policy, I'm inclined to listen to our staff. Mr. Alfred seems to be very knowledgeable and an expert in this area, so I'd be inclined to follow his direction. But I remember reading and hearing about Fort St. John having the same practice. And then Facebook, you can't trust Facebook all that much, but I did read a lot of comments, even in the Alaska News article, from professionals saying that this isn't proper practice, this isn't best practice. Like, is there any way before we make a decision just to get best practices and/or policies of -30 or below temperatures, so that we can see what the practices are from municipalities as well as industry, and maybe use that as a guiding tool as well.
Councilor.
Yeah, it's called an operator's manual, right? So in the operator's manual, it tells you the temperatures you can operate your equipment at. There's certain things you have to do in certain weather conditions. You got to use a lighter weight grease. There's, different coolants, different engine oils, different hydraulic oils. There's all kinds of different things you can do. You can add a pro heat system to your hydraulics so that they're constantly warm. Fort St. John might shut down. Dawson Creek didn't. My friends that have graders in the industry, they didn't shut down. Guys are still out running them around. And all I'm getting at is I don't care what the number is. Set a number based on what the manufacturers say that it is, that this is the maximum that we want to go out to maintain the efficiency and the quality of our equipment is -30. If we're in a bad way and we've got 2 feet of snow out there, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to run that grader down the road. It's gonna have to be in the shop overnight, and it's have to go for 2 hours and clear a road, then come back in and warm up for 2 hours. If that's what we gotta do to get that road done, it's gonna have to be done. But what Mr. Lowther said was like, well, I don't know how we would override that policy. It's very simple. You write it into the policy. The temperature that we're willing to operate such and such equipment at is -30. If it's snow accumulation beyond a foot or whatever the number turns out to be, we're going to have to run the equipment out. If we're not going to run the equipment out, we're going to have to hire our contractors to do the work for us. So, it can be written into the policy. All I'm saying is just get it in a policy. We can see how it works in the next year coming or the year after that, and see where that goes. And if we don't like the way that works, then maybe you decide to make a change to put more money into a hydraulic heating system or some such. But again, I don't see how that is beneficial to us when you have a shop you can park. Every piece of equipment we have fits in that shop. Correct me if I'm wrong. The graders don't fit in the shop anymore?
No, not directed to staff.
Sorry.
No problem, Ms. Thompson.
I've seen the graders in the shop. I don't know how they don't fit, but.
Yeah, no problem, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you.
Get to the answer, I just didn't want to battle, but.
I'll have Mr. Oliver or Mr. Lowther reply to the fitting of all of our equipment into the shops.
So we have 4 bays. Sand truck is parked in one. One's a hoist. You can't really park heavy equipment on it. Loader gets parked in one, and the steamer is parked in the other. The equipment shed has the Vector in it. You could fit one loader in there, but we usually park the garbage truck in there.
Councilor?
So, okay, maybe what I'm getting at is the equipment that we have, if you needed to fit it in the shop to keep it warm, could be brought into the shop in an emergency purpose. If you need to move a water truck or you need to move, you guys can, you can run coolant through the lines, you can do whatever you have to do on those types of trucks. So when we get to a situation where we're getting 30 and 40 below temperatures and we're going to have the equipment out, they can have the equipment in the shop warm. Yes, they've got to take other pieces of equipment out and find an area to warm them or whatnot. But if that needs to be done, maybe we need to have an equipment shop for that. Maybe we need to have an area, I don't know. There's lots of other, we've got the Quonset shops around. We've got other areas that we can keep this stuff temporarily warm. I don't know. It just to me, I don't see us shutting the community down when it gets to minus 30. It still has to be done. Put it into the policy so we've got something to work around.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Councilor Helm. Whether it's gonna be a number or whatever and not, and maybe we need to look through the manuals or the best practice or maybe staff has that number, but we need to try something different than it's clear for staff to follow. I mean, I get it, they went with the weather article in there. You gotta rely that they read through the thing, and that was something they could put into place. They followed other communities, whether it's Port St. John shut down, we had Dawson Creek didn't, and that was well advertised that Dawson Creek did not shut down. Port St. John did, but Dawson Creek had no problem making sure they were on Facebook or energetic cities newscasts that they didn't shut down at all. They were full steam ahead doing snow removal. So, I think we need to find out what that best practice is or what that policy or that temp number should be, whether it's by the manuals that Councilor Howe has talked about. Again, I'm not going to get tapped into where you should look for the number, but I'm pretty sure staff should be able to bring something back about that. So I think we should make a motion that we ask for that. In my opinion, we're looking for staff to bring back the best practice for temp number and making sure that there's a policy part there in regards to if there is accumulation of snow, even at minus 40, the equipment will be out to maintain roads. Let's put a motion on the floor.
I'll second that. You just put it on the floor. I'll second it.
Okay. I don't believe Jane got that as a motion, but.
Okay. Update the policy, isn't that what we're looking to do?
Yeah, we're just looking for a report back or an update from staff in regards to best practice, attempt that maybe we should shut down at. And then have something worded in that same concept that if we do get enough snow, like one of the staff members already said, like how can we make sure that we can go overboard the policy of the minus 40 or whatever it may be. Is that a good enough? I don't know, maybe the staff can do up a motion for us.
So maybe, could we just ask them to update the policy, bring the policy back updated? Because there may be other things than just the temperature in here. I've got a few other things I want to ask questions about while it's on.
That's why it's on the floor.
But you know what I'm saying? Rather than do a motion on this one specific thing, we do a motion on the entire.
But you're gonna make motions to change the policy. Anytime we're gonna change, any kind of wording in this policy you're gonna change, we need to do it by motion. Then staff will bring the policy back with the changes in here. They may change something, they might find that we've worded something wrong and they'll bring they'll change the word, but if we want to change the policy that we've established, we need to put it as motions what we want to change in here, and then staff will come back with the changes in the policy to approve the policy as amended. Councilor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I mean, I would like to see a report back. I mean, a lot of times we have questions about these things, and it's good to say refer back to a report. We actually have, and that's our job, right? Getting information to provide, to make good decisions. And if we have a report in front of us that says, operator manual says it's 35 on all these pieces of equipment, well, it's 35. Or if we see, well, it's 30, I can refer back to those people that, question our decision making and say, no, we have the information right here. So I like that.
Yeah, I agree with the report on that part of it, but there's other discussion items in regards to what's in front of us tonight, and whether it's changes, Councilor Howe, or something you want to just get some more clarity on. Tonight's the night, that way if we want to make a change that you bring up, let's make a change and they can bring it back.
And you want to do a motion for each one of those things that we see in there.
If we're going to make a change, it has to be by motion, staff. Is that not correct?
And then each one that staff wants to make, they just make it on their own without a motion.
Well, they do change bylaws.
Yeah.
Right, so there is some changes coming forward in regards to a bylaw. When they update policies, they're updating a policy for a reason.
Okay.
We've asked this policy to come back because but us as a council as a whole thought, geez, we missed something in the policy because we didn't have a number for a temp there.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked for the policy to come back to make that change.
Okay.
We could have let staff had them bring it back and they could have made the change in mind. If it was minus 30 staff picked or whatever it may be, it could have been there and read already and maybe we could have debated that temp number, but then we wouldn't have the manuals.
Gotcha.
We don't have all that.
Gotcha, yep. Okay, let's go.
Did you want to discuss?
So we're gonna do, we want to do a motion to ask staff to amend the policy or for a report on minimum and maximum operating temperatures of our equipment? Is that what we're asking for?
We're looking for that before we put a temp there. Like, I don't want to pick a number
Sure.
for non-operating temp, right?
Okay, I'll put a motion on the floor that we ask staff for a report on our minimum and maximum operating temperatures of all our equipment, DTR.
Seconder? Councilor Norbert? Discussion? Councilor Helm?
I just want to make sure that, that we talk about emergency use as well in there, and what constitutes emergency or a snow event that needs to be cleared regardless of the temperature. And if we don't want to do it, do we get a contractor to do it? If we're, is there any amount that we need that done? So.
Now, when you put the motion on the floor in regards to all equipment, are we looking for just snow equipment? Are we looking for all equipment owned by the district timbers?
I don't know. Well,
The only reason I ask that, because we know they have other equipment that's not snow removal. I mean, it's a snow policy, but if we're looking for all equipment, we need to make sure staff's aware we're looking for all equipment.
Yeah, and maximum and minimum, we had the heat bowl or whatever we had here, is there a temperature in which it gets so hot that we don't operate that equipment? Does the lawnmower not have air conditioning in it so the guys can't run it? I don't know. Maybe there's something there that we need to know about as well.
Yeah.
So.
Any more discussion? Okay. Can staff just read back that motion, please?
So the motion was to ask staff to do a report on the minimum and maximum operating temperatures for our equipment.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Is there anything else with snow removal? Councilor Helm?
Yep, a couple things here on, talks about district right-of-way, approximately 3 to 4 meters from the edge of a curb or sidewalk in front of all residential properties. This area is to be used for snow storage and has accumulated along streets. So I see this, when we put this policy in a long time ago, we brought out our signs that, you put the signs out for the upper bench. Everybody's supposed to have their vehicles cleared off the road so the grader can go through more quickly, efficiently, and safely. But we don't really deal with that stuff where people are parking their vehicles on their lawns. Guys are putting firewood on their front yards. There's trailers, that type of stuff. Do we ever actually get bylaw to deal with that stuff? It's within our policy, but I don't see it being done. Is that a practice that we should have in place? That bylaw goes out to ask people to remove vehicles off the roads or equipment out of that 3 or 4 meter right of way?
Yeah, and Councilor, I think that's an awesome question because my home is, I have a neighbor that has stuff there, so you can see the town trying to blow it forward more. Well, you know where it ends up, all over my lawn or my driveway. So staff, I'd like to hear from staff in regards to, because it is actually in the other bylaws that we have in regards to storage on the front.
Thank you. I'll have Chief Curry respond to bylaw enforcement to the bylaws in place. Chief Curry?
Mayor, Council, good evening. So to your question, when it comes to vehicles, bylaw enforcement will actually go out in tandem with the road crew that's going out. We do have quite a bit of success with getting people to move vehicles off. Now, whether the signs go up late at night, they're not exactly lit, they're coming home from the mine, it's kind of blurry-eyed, there's a whole bunch of different excuses that we get. The majority of the cases, they're more than willing to move their vehicles off. We see really good compliance with that. Those individuals that we do have to warn repeatedly do get written warnings, and in a few cases, not specifically this year, but in years past, we have towed vehicles out of ways. Our operations team has determined some very common choke points, and so we've established no parking, especially in winter months. This is, for example, behind 320 Northgate on Spruce and Cottonwood. For that exact reason, we couldn't get either emergency services through there, we can't get the grader through there, so having no parking on one side of the street was brought forward actually for this season, and it seems to be working very well. When it comes to parking on an individual's lawn, even if it's within that right-of-way, the zoning bylaw takes prevail on what use and storage of a lot. So this is one of the points that we want to see in an upcoming zoning, the amendment or the recreation of the zoning bylaw that may or may not be happening later on this year. because we have to be very tactful when we say you can't park something on there, on that right of way, because then the argument is that that right of way is now the district's responsibility to clear the snow, to do the lawn maintenance, to do all that kind of stuff that's there. And it's not 100% if they're gonna pile snow on that side or this side, it's not finite. So in areas where we know that there's a choke point or a safety hazard, we have had conversations with individuals. We haven't been able to actually go out and enforce, no, you have to move it there for that reason.
So Ms. Thompson, just on my understanding, the bylaw we were talked about last year was if you're gonna park for parking stalls, it had to be a hard surface, asphalt or concrete, or cement, sorry. So if we have people parking on lawns, that is not asphalt or cement. Can't remember the bylaw we had a discussion with, I'm not sure the council can remember the name of the bylaw, but it was talked about and it had to be on a hard surface, either asphalt or cement. So parking on the grass would be part of that bylaw, wouldn't it?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So it is within our zoning bylaw, and I will have Chief Curry respond to that a little bit more as well.
Deputy Mayor and Council, so the zoning bylaw stipulates how many off-street parking spots per X zone, whether it's an R1, R2, whatever the classification is. That's to say what the makeup is, and you're correct, it does have to be hard asphalt type. There's essentially, you can't be a gravel driveway. It needs to be asphalt, it can be cinder block, paving stone, or anything like that. But what it doesn't say is that you can't park on your lawn. There's nothing right now in the bylaw that says that you cannot use the front portion of your lawn other than putting a makeshift structure, so a pop-up tent, those little garages or whatever you want to call it, the fabric shelter. You can't do that in your lawn. You can't put a fence in your lawn. It is pretty finite in the zoning bylaw what you can and can't do on the front parcel of your lot. But storage for a vehicle, for parking an RV or anything like that is not in there, and that's one of the areas that we want to address in future zoning bylaws.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, anything else?
What's the other one?
Councillor Howe, anything else from any other council? Questions? Councillor Majinski?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Under low priority roads, you have at the airport. Would that not fall under emergency services when we have to fly somebody out and the access? Because I thought in the past it was a high priority and they had the plow truck going out there to clear off the runway. Because I think there's a minimum of snow that you have to have out on the runway that has to be cleared, 3 or 4 inches or something like that. I think we talked about this in the past, so I just wanted to clarify if it's still considered a low priority.
I need that from staff, but it is low, and it's when they have a snow event out there, they actually shut the airport down. Staff calls it, I can't remember what it's called, staff will know it, but they can actually call in and shut the airport down until it can be snow removed. And it happens quite a bit. I know when I was on UBCM, this was lots, so.
Thank you.
Ms. Thompson?
It's called a NOTAM when we do close it. And, sorry, I was just finding it in the policy here.
23.
Yeah. And they are low priority, and staff is out fairly quickly to do it, but we do issue the NOTAMs, and if required in emergency, usually it's STARS that'll come in, but for landing out at the airport, they always check what the status is before they would ever leave to do anything. So where staff is very diligent and regular in recording the NOTAMs and calling them in, and then once everything is cleared, then they're taken off again. And sometimes there's nothing that we can do because with the freeze-thaw cycle, we end up with a lot of ice on the runway, so it has to stay closed until it does thaw, because the cost to actually get rid of the ice on the airport is just too high for the usage that we currently have.
Perfect. Councillor Howe?
Yeah, just a question. Is there any benefit for us looking at sanding with bigger rock? So I talked to a guy with Caribou Road Services, and his impression is that the district uses too small of rock. So I just thought I'd bring it forward. His thought is that it's sand, and the type of material we're using works good for highways so that you don't get broken windows or cracked windshields. And he thought that possibly the gravel that we use could be bigger, and I just thought I'd throw the question out.
Thank you. I will have Mr. Oliver respond.
So yeah, we looked at our pit, the Baxter pit. We did some test holes this summer, and farther down there is better material, more stone. So we'll be looking at using that in the future.
Right on. Good.
Councilor Majewski.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I actually came in and talked to Ms. Thompson about that today about our sidewalks, and I found that the rocks on the sidewalk were too large, and I've had complaints by members of the community saying they could roll their ankles on them because they're quite large, or larger than marbles.
Wow.
I've actually seen it myself, and I wondered why, because they're like river rock, they're round, and I thought that was kind of odd to have large stones on our sidewalks. So she's going to look into that, but I thought it's kind of funny that we'd use a larger stone, and I thought it was too large already, but so it's interesting to know.
Anything else, Councilor?
Thank you. I had a question about some, like the snow berm removal in like our downtown sidewalks. One area that was brought to my attention is like in front of the bank and the liquor store. And apparently after snow events, that area is clear very quickly. And there's no snow berm along the parking area. Do we do that? Are we quick on that, or is that the private businesses that operate them?
You talk about other sidewalk in front of the liquor store in the bank?
Yeah.
That's private. I'll confirm, but it's a private contractor, Ms. Thompson.
You are correct, it is private.
It's privately owned, so it's just like my business, we do our own. Councilor?
So with that, is like the area in front of the post office privately owned? It's owned by Canada Post?
Well, it's owned by somebody, I believe that they lease from somebody. That's, front of the post office would be a private business. Snow removal. Ms. Thompson, am I not correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm not giving it out. I mean, I can only think that's how it is. I just don't want to be false to council or to members of the public. Councilor Helm?
But it's sidewalks, not the parking lots, right? Not the places where people park their vehicles on the roads.
Correct, it's just a sidewalk, not where they park, not where vehicles are, but the sidewalk is definitely private. So like, I understand if the town gets there quick, like and you see it, I mean, the town gets out sometimes, the snow has happened Sunday night, they already know that it's gonna be over a certain amount. They have an early crew come in, if they get if they get downtown core done before we scrape our sidewalks, we can end up putting, people hire their private snow removal company, end up putting a berm on the edge of that sidewalk. Because they didn't get it to the street before town went. Councilor?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the reason why I ask it is it's a lot of times people come to us with concerns, complaints. And it's, well, I don't know if we're fully responsible, but if it finds out that we're not, and I just found out, okay, go talk to these organizations and you know, you have to bring your concerns to them.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. Same thing, that's what I do. In certain areas in town, I have no problem calling and complaining. And it's not owned by the town, right? You have to call the business, so. Anything else in regards to snow poles, Councilor?
The last one I have is, do we have an option to submit the seniors assistance form electronically? And if we do not, how can we, I'd be prepared to make a motion to create that. But the issue is that there's some people that have difficulties coming into town hall to fill out a form that can easily be typed up, in my opinion, can be easily typed up and sent in electronically.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. If that would be the case, and they want to submit something electronically, they are more than welcome to phone town hall, and staff will be able to direct them on what they can do to submit the form electronically.
That's Vice Councilor Helm? Or Councilor Rudy, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Councilor Helm?
So just back to staff, is there anything that staff can, you know, we've had some turnover, some new people in there. Is there anything that staff can add to this policy that they see, things that we could do better with our snow clearing, more efficient, safer, better use of our time? Is there anything that they see within the policy that should be adjusted or changed, or parts they don't like to the policy?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. At this time, staff have not gone in depth with a working group to review the policy, but as we are reviewing and updating it, we will make suggestions to council, as we normally do with red lines, saying that this would work better for us. You know, we see it going this way, and then council has the ability to make changes and or approve the policy and recommendations from staff.
Anything else in regards to some, Councilor Majewski?
Nothing else to add, but I have to step out. I'm sorry.
All right.
Council.
Just the map again. Just the
Oh,
staff.
yeah.
Just the staff on the map again.
Sorry?
Just to staff on the map again, like, it's another map that's not fantastic in our agenda. Talked about our mapping, like, the roads are missing on it, the industrial park's not on there. Half of the lower bench isn't on there, so. Just a mention.
Anything else in regards, Ms. Thompson, in regards to maps, I thought we had something, or maybe it was through the community forest, I'm not sure if they pick up our roads and stuff with your, community forest does not, and I'm just wondering, do you have our boundaries?
It's exactly the same as like Google Maps would be. So it's.
Okay. Ready for that one? Okay, so we're gonna move on to 5.2, 2021 Service Award Acknowledgement. A report from the Deputy Director of Corporate Services dated February 14th. The 2022 percent counts for acknowledgement of the 2021 Service Award recipients. Recommendation. Councillor Lehman.
The council acknowledges the 2021 District of Tumbler recipients for long-term service awards for 2021.
Seconded. Councillor Norberg. Discussion. Councillor Norberg.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to say, like, this is, I really miss this portion of our Christmas party. You know, we used to recognize everyone's service, and we have some big milestones here. And I think it's amazing to see that we've had such good retention, and thank you to everyone who is still putting in the time and effort, making our community a great place. So, you know, well done.
So just the staff, or Ms. Thompson, is there a thought or anything like that of bringing your staff in and presenting at a meeting or just before a meeting? I mean, be it live, so residents realize how much time some of these employees have worked for the district of Tumbler.
Thank you. In the past, our staff have shied away from coming before a live feed. So we felt it was still acceptable to bring it and celebrate them at this point with by acknowledging their names. But in the past, they have not wanted to attend because they don't want to go on live.
I think just like a small amendment to the motion. I mean, and maybe not, but maybe we should make a small amendment that if it passes, that we read out the 5-year service award, the 10-year service awards, the 15-year service awards, and the 25-year service award, and the 30-year, and read out their names. I mean, I believe that's, you know, to me, it's just a little bit more respect to Ms. Thompson's staff in the time they've been here. So make that amendment. Secretary, Councilor Milbury, any discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? Okay, cool. All in favor of the amended motion? Carried. Okay. I think we'll share this. Councilor Lehman, I get you to read out the 5-year.
Okay, 5-year service award. Colette Ernst, AJ Cooper, Dustin Curry, Jackie Green, and Jenna Johnston.
For the 10-year, Councilor Milbury?
For the 10-year service awards, we are recognizing Alan McGusty.
For the 15-year service award, Councilor Helm?
It's Diana Gies, Tyler Oliver, and Roxanne Trudeau.
25-year service award would be for Sean O'Reilly. And Ms. Thompson, would you mind reading out the 30-year award?
The 30-year service award has been presented to Sean Shea.
So, hats off to your staff. Okay. Again, I mean, we missed out when you have your Christmas party where you're able to recognize your staff. 5.3, co-host 2023 North Central Local Government Association opportunity. A report from the Director of Corporate Services dated February 14, 2022 to provide requested follow-up information regarding staff involvement and cost. For the district to co-host the 2023 Northern Central Local Government Association Conference and AGM with the City of Dawson Creek. Recommendation, Councilor Milbury.
For discussion.
Discussion, seconder. Councilor Lehman, all in favor? Councilor Milbury.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Katrelka. I'm glad that they're having a NCLGA conference here, but unless that I'd like to see a little more for our contribution of $5,000. I'd like us to, host something or be a part of something. Yeah, I don't support us contributing $5,000 for an event if all we're getting is a tour.
Any more discussion in regards to your worship?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just curious, the report or the request by council was to ask what staff involvement was going to be for this successful bid, and I don't see it in the report. Has Dawson Creek put together a structure in regards to co-hosting, or I don't see what their offer is, I just see previous.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. So at this time, we haven't received anything from the city of Dawson Creek. They're having their first planning week, their first planning meeting the first week of March. In the previous staff from Tumbler Ridge were not involved. It was members of council. So there was no additional staff time required last time.
Go ahead, your worship.
Thank you. I'm not really in favor of co-hosting this. I think, City of Dawson Creek is quite capable of hosting this event on their own. It would be possible, or I'd be in favor of possibly hosting a tour in our area for the delegates, but as far as co-hosting, I wouldn't be in favor.
Any more discussion? Ms. Thompson, obviously at this motion, do you need a motion to state that we reply back to Dawson Creek that we are not looking to participate in the co-hosting?
Yes, please.
Councilmember?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll make a motion that we inform Dawson Creek, City of Dawson Creek, that we are not interested in co-hosting the NCLGA conference 2022.
Seconder? Councilor Lehman? Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Alcohol control, so 5.4, alcohol control, drugs and medications policy. A report from the Director of Protective Services dated February 14th, 2022 to seek council review on a newly created alcohol control, drugs and medications policy. Recommendation. Councilor.
Okay. The council reviews the proposed alcohol, drugs, and medications policy, HR-8, and forwards the policy to the next regular meeting for approval.
Seconder. Councilor Helm. Discussion. Councilor Helm.
In Appendix A, it talks about classification of high-risk, safety-sensitive positions. Are there any positions that aren't classified as high-risk, safety-sensitive positions? Because this pretty much seems like everybody in the DTR. Would the other list be a little shorter?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I will have Chief Curry respond as he was the head of the policy review. Chief Curry? I did ask the same question as well when it came to the list.
Deputy Mayor, Council. This list actually does seem quite arduous. You can see that quite a few positions were actually added to this list. When the policy was actually amended in 2017, we sought legal opinion on what actually classifies to a high-risk, safety-sensitive position. It was actually quite long. Once again, we kind of had to scale it back in the interest of what actually meets that threshold to actually require somebody to do a pre-employment drug test. And yet, as an answer to Councillor Howe's question, a lot of our administrative, finance, economic development, those that aren't actually put into the running equipment, etc., don't meet the threshold for that high-risk, safety-sensitive position. Merely the fact of operating a vehicle does not qualify. Where you're operating a vehicle in an open cab, for example, as a summer student or seasonal laborer, it kind of meets that threshold and it kind of puts you over that edge. So we really have had to kind of look at this as a working group and balance the risk and the benefit, I guess.
Councillor Helm?
And then 6.1, it talks about pre-employment screening. It says the district will identify those positions that are safety sensitive, and the successful applicants for such positions may be required to submit a drug test as a condition of employment, see Appendix A. So why is it just a drug test that we're looking for? So like out in the industry, it's an A&D test. It's an alcohol and drug test. We're talking just drug test. And wording such as may be required to submit a drug test leaves it sort of open-ended for somebody to make a decision. If we don't want to drug test this person, we won't. If we want to drug test that person, we will. Why is it not that every employee who comes to work for the DTR is subject to an A&D pre-employment test? Why do we not have everybody, regardless of safety sensitive or not? What's the benefit of that? Why do we just not test everybody?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I will have Chief Curry respond as he has a little more experience in this field than I do.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Howe, you're absolutely right. This is just an oversight. It should actually read alcohol and drug test, and that's why we have council do the review on this, because some of this stuff gets caught. We look at the same thing day in, day out, and it all kind of blends together. So I appreciate you pointing that out. We'll make that change. To your point about having the blank, the blanket policy about alcohol and drug testing across the board, it was by legal advice where we start to infringe on case law and discrimination, etc. That our legal expertise, our legal counsel has actually said it needs to be that high-risk, safety-sensitive position. You can't just say everybody and then you discriminate, and it gets a little bit more technically and legal. I could try to see if I can find the legal opinion that was given to us at the time, and that might better answer your question.
Councillor?
I mean, it just seems interesting to me. I don't know what the deal is with the union, if you're within the union, if they are subject to this stuff before they sign on with the union. I'm not too sure, but my concern is the subjectiveness of it. So the way the wording is in there, it sounds like to me that someone can decide if that person gets an A&D test or not, and regardless if it's safety sensitive or not. And I have a concern around that in itself could be discrimination. So you may get somebody who doesn't want to do an A&D test on their buddy, so their buddy doesn't get an A&D test done, but they get the job instead. To me, it's less discriminatory if everybody who comes to take a job at the DTR needs one. If we've got legal advice to the contrary, then obviously that's something different. But the wording in the pre-employment screening, I think, should not be subjective to any of those positions. If you are applying for a job in the DTR for any of those positions, it should be mandatory, not may be required. That's my take on it.
Ms. Thompson, do we need motions to change wording? Like I know staff's already picked up that it should have said drug and alcohol, so that's wording. I believe Councillor Howe's doing the same thing I've started, and that's the word may.
Thank you. I think that one, we're gonna have to get more detail on that, so it won't be ready for adoption or to forward to the next council meeting for adoption. I would appreciate if we would have a motion that staff get clarification on pre-employment screening 6.1. The word may.
So first we have a motion on the floor. So we'd have to defeat the motion that we put on the floor, which is fine.
We're discussing it, isn't it, the motion?
We're in the discussion, there was a motion on the floor before we had a discussion, so we just gotta defeat that one and then, not right now, Councillor Noble. Go ahead, Ms. Noble.
Sorry, as a sidebar here, we just had, we can change that word right away to shall. Chief Curry just had a quick conversation with me, we can just change the word to shall.
Councillor Noble?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And so my concern is with the legal opinion we received, and from my understanding, like this is when I was doing a lot of looking around for criminal record checks and legal rights and opinions on whether we were allowed to. And like, that was sort of gray, but I remember reading human rights issues and discrimination issues when it comes to drug and alcohol screenings, and how it potentially can discriminate against people who have drug and alcohol problems. So like when Chief Curry is talking about legal opinions on best practices and liability, rather than make the decision immediately, it might be a good idea to just look back at that, because it's ringing a bell with me that, yeah, we're not allowed to have a blanket. I mean, it's nice to say the rules apply to everyone, but the rules, for equity's sakes, the rules don't apply to everyone. So, I mean, we need to have some exceptions.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. If you look at the detail under 6.2, there is there's an option there at the time for the district to discuss the results with the candidates.
And just some clarity, Ms. Thompson, this policy was actually updated or voted on in 2017, but it was actually put on hold and never put into action. Is that correct in regards to this policy?
So in my policy book, it says in progress. And from my understanding with previous staff at the time is that it wasn't being enforced all the time. And so therefore, in my tenure here, we've been updating policies, and this was one of them that we brought back for council to approve with updated wording.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion from Councillor Helm?
Just about the procedure for a post-incident test. 3.2 talks about the employee be removed from his or her duties immediately and required to meet with their department head. The employee may contact, and if he or she wishes, the union representation where applicable, present for this meeting. So in previous employment that I've been involved in, yes, you can absolutely have your union present with you, but there is a distinct timeline from when the incident occurs to when you need to have had your test done. I don't really see the wording around there or the urgency around getting this test done. At the present time, I don't think we have testing facilities in Tumbler Ridge that I'm aware of. And you'd have to take that employee to Dawson Creek. But in places where I've worked previously, that employee cannot leave the care and attention of their supervisor. So their supervisor has to take them within their vehicle or the district vehicle directly to a testing facility. So, like, I don't know if there's enough wording in there to be defined enough in the event that you had to do a post-incident A&D test. Is staff happy with the wording that's in there? Is that enough?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I'll have Chief Curry respond. Chief Curry?
Deputy Mayor, so to Councillor Howe's point in 3.2, this is just under suspicion. So the employee will be removed from performing his or her duties immediately. This is to take that employee out of the field, right, for a discussion, and that's why the department head section is there. It does not mean automatically you're going for an E&D test that this happens. That happens a little bit down further, 3.3, where it's an opinion that the employee may have consumed a controlled drug or alcohol. The department head may require the employee to go under, submit a drug and or alcohol screening. Council Howe is right. Currently, we do not have testing facilities available for use for the public, or for private, I guess, in Tumbler Ridge. We have been utilizing a company out of Dawson Creek where we were actually taking individuals to. So yes, Council Howe was right. They'd be in the direct care of their supervisor. But that also brought into the question of forcible confinement for that individual. If they said no and you still put them into a vehicle, you are essentially confining somebody against their will. With that in mind, we've looked at a couple different companies out of Dawson Creek that will do on-site testing for us. So that, yes, there's a lead time, or lag time, I should say, in order for them to come out and do a mobile service for us. That's there. So at this time, even with how infrequent this policy is actually utilized, it's in administration's opinion that language is acceptable.
So then again, the may comment comes in again, where the department head may decide to do a drug and alcohol test. Again, I'm concerned about the subjective nature of the wording in there, that the department head can decide, well, this is a buddy of mine, I've worked together for 15 years, and I don't think they're going to pass a drug test, so I am not going to send them for a drug test. I have concerns about that there should just be a defined amount. If you have, like the mines do, it's a metal-on-metal contact. If you have metal-on-metal contact, both operators have to go for the drug test. Some type of parameters around when we are going to send people, regardless of what the department heads say, just because of the fact that it's the buddy-buddy system that gets removed from that.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I'll have Chief Curry respond again.
Deputy Mayor and Council, so I 100% see where you're going with it, Councillor Howe. And it does, it's perspective, right? It has that optics of it that you can have preferential treatment given to that. When you're doing drug and alcohol screening, you have to establish a trend. It's not a one-time done, and you have a person that has a problem. In order to try and impose on somebody's free will to say, we're going to drug and alcohol test you, you have to have that trend. So that is either pre-existing cases of accidents, and maybe it was a couple of minor things and they went over and it was okay. We understand that sometimes things happen. It's where you have a high degree of either loss of life or high dollar damage value, that it's really put on to the department head to say, yes, this meets the threshold. I think I'll leave it at that and just have a larger discussion.
And do we have it? What is the threshold? So again, that's what my concern is that becomes subjective, that what you think is serious and I think is serious are two different things. So I choose to do the A&D and you choose not to do the A&D. So if there is a set of parameters that are set out, should it be within this policy? And I think that it should. I think that we should have something in place. And, I've seen in other places where union officials union guys had issues with management never having to go for A&D tests, that the union implemented that every time a union employee had to go for an A&D test, they were allowed to then select somebody from management to go for an A&D test as well. So there are lots of other ways to work around this. I just think that maybe it needs a little bit more. If we're going to implement this was in 2017, we talked about doing it. So if we're going to implement it, we need to have this defined, and a P&P is the exact place where we do this. We start running these ideas through, talking about it, and see if this is the direction we want to go. I think it's long overdue for the District of Tumbler Ridge not to be having this nailed down. Every other employer in the community, I think, pretty well does it. So the major employers anyways. And it's just from my experience and what you're talking about, Chief, it's just slightly different from the way I understand the way the mines do it. Maybe they're under a different set of rules than what a municipality would be under. But I'd like to see some more wording around this.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. So when staff reviewed this policy, we did go to other municipalities and see what other municipalities had out there for drug and alcohol testing, and there aren't that many that have detailed detailed policies in there. So there aren't that many municipalities that we were able to pull from, but we did pull from some fairly large municipalities and some of their wording.
Councillor Lehman, Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think Councillor Howe is right. In metal to metal or metal to concrete or metal to building, I think should constitute a drug and alcohol test. And I think once that's established, then people realize that there are consequences if something does happen. So they may be less likely to use drugs and alcohol. So you set that boundary that if you run into another piece of equipment or run into a building, you're going to get drug tested. End of story.
Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My only I think it's reasonable. I mean, I know industry has that practice. The only area where I see it and hear of an issue is like there are some drugs that stay in your system for long periods of time afterwards. So I don't think we should be preventing our staff from partaking in, whatever evening, weekend fun they want to do, right? Good example is marijuana, right? Like I know people who've had accidents in the mine, and like this is their story, so I mean it's anecdotal. But marijuana stays in your system for multiple days. So if somebody, goes and have a good time Friday night and they have an accident Tuesday morning, nothing related to their cannabis use, and now they pop that they've been smoking marijuana, and then all of a sudden they're in hot water, where it has nothing to do with their performance, right? So that's the side that I think we should also be cognizant of, right? Like, they have to be at a certain level at the time of or within, right? And as, after your time at work, you're free to do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't impact your decisions at work, right? That's all.
Yeah, I agree. And there's different testing now out there that it actually you can, I won't say it can tell you in the last hour you smoke, but they can tell how much concentrates in your body that you smoked in the last 2 hours. There's a new testing system out there, so. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. I was just actually asking Chief Curry about that as well. Like I know that there is testing that they can, it does specify a timeline from here to there, right? 8 hours from bottle to throttle, right? That also helps with it, right? Like.
Impairment level, yep.
So
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
So just in regards to this, I mean, we're looking for a bit more into the policy. I mean, is this maybe where we just defer this and set it back, or vote down the motion that's on the floor? I mean, we have the motion on the floor that staff has recommended. I mean, obviously, we are not ready to put this to another meeting for approval. I mean, I think there's some, I think whether staff has to go to legal first. I think we're looking for a bit more grip inside this policy. I mean, whether we need to do it in motions, I'm imagine some council will put it as a motion if we need to, but I think, I'm not sure it's easier to defer this or to turn a motion down. That's kind of what I'm looking for from staff.
Thank you. Both, actually, if we can defeat and then defer so staff can get more information and clarity.
Okay. Any more discussion? I mean, I'm not trying to shorten the discussion around the policy. I mean, I think, and Ms. Thompson, do you want some of this stuff clearly motioned in regards to what we're asking for in the policy? Do you guys want to play with the policy a bit more to bring it back first?
I would prefer that we play with the policy to bring it back.
Councilor Helm.
And I guess my question is more to council, is this the direction that we want to go as a council? Do we want to implement pre and post drug and alcohol tests to a higher standard than what we previously have? I want to. I think that's where we should be. I think we should be, industry standard or industry leader when it comes to this. That to me is not the direction to give to staff, but the flavor for staff to see where we're going with this. Because to me, that this sat since 2017 is terrible. But I'm glad that Ms. Thompson has picked it up and is running with it. So I just want to know how council feels.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. But my thoughts was that was the idea of this policy when we talked about it in the previous term. I mean, I didn't realize it was, when it was sitting there and not being fully implemented. I mean, that was the idea when we talked back then. I mean, we have different council today, but I mean, that's why, it's in front of us for the changes. But I mean, yeah, we should have these changes, but we should also have all the information that we're looking for, whether it's metal on metal, metal on cement, whatever that we're going to use for that one to implement the drug policy. Just same as the snow policy. Give me a -10.
Yeah.
Right? So, Councilor Lee.
Yeah, I think we need to make this clear so that everybody knows where they're at. You don't want to go into this halfway. Just make sure it's clear to everyone so that they know where they stand.
Let's go to Ms. Thompson first.
Sorry, thank you. I do want to note that the policy was adopted in 2017. I don't know what until I came here. Like, I do know that there was drug testing that was brought in. I don't think it was more incident related than anything else. Just when I came, my policy book said in progress. So it was one of those things that we talked about and now we've been able to update and bring back to council.
Okay.
So I'm not saying it wasn't implemented and that it sat there. It was implemented, but there was just some clarification that we needed and brought the policy back for
It was unintended, but play within the gray areas.
maybe, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think we've all seen that, right? Councilor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't really have an issue. My concern just comes back to legality issues and like what's our liability of discrimination. So I'd like to move that we.
I know we still have a motion on the floor.
Oh, excuse me.
Can't do another one, so. Any more discussion in regards to this, so then we can. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we're looking at defeating the motion on the floor. The motion on the floor is, what staff has recommended, the council reviews proposed alcohol, drugs, and medications policy, HR 8, and forwards the policy to the next regular council meeting for approval. So, all in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Councilor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And as I said, like I'm just, I heard something from Chief Curry regarding like we have received a legal opinion on this matter, right? It's nice for us to have opinions, but I think a large part of our job is reducing risk and liability. And if there is any legal concern about us requiring pre-employment drug and alcohol tests as well as post-incident drug and alcohol testing, I think we should at least consult a lawyer before we make that change.
Yeah, and I would think staff, when we're gonna ask this to be sent back, I would think that's gonna be part of their going back and going through it. Like, I mean, that's why we're saying it back, because they want some clarity as well. So, Councilor.
And I just like can we check with staff if they need us to give them leeway to use that legal funding, right? Because sometimes they need.
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you. No, we don't.
That's what they have. What motion did you want? I'm sorry that we just send this back to staff. We were looking for something else you mentioned, Ms. Thompson.
Defer.
Okay, so I'll take a motion to defer this back to staff. Councilor Lehman?
Make a motion, we defer this so staff can review it and bring it back.
Councilor Noguera? Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Ms. Thompson, my understanding in regards to our meeting is 5.5 is influenced on 5.4?
Correct.
So you want us to defer 5.5 as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, can I get a motion to defer this? Councilor Lehman.
I'd like to defer 5.5.
Seconder, Councilor Helm. Discussion? You Mayor? Did you have something, Keith? Oh, sorry. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor? Carried. 5.6, Spurs Club Utility Commission update. A report from Director of Corporate Services dated February 14th, 2022 to inform council that District of Tumbler is registered as an intervener in the Pacific Northern Gas P&G 2022 revenue requirements proceedings. Recommendation. Councilor Noguera.
For discussion.
Second. Councilor Lehman. All in favor? Carried. Councilor Noguera.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I had a discussion with our active, I don't know how to describe it, BCUC group, and they presented a reasonable course of action for us to take to have an alternative to P&G providing services to Tumbler Ridge. Apparently, Fortis BC can potentially operate in the area, and this individual, this community member, has approached Fortis BC, and they've said, yeah, we could potentially come into Tumbler Ridge. What's stopping us is BCUC, and BCUC holds the keys of the kingdom, so to speak, on who can operate in the area. So we could potentially, I believe, we should be reaching out to Fortis BC to see if they'd be interested in operating in the area, which according to this community member they are, but we need to do our diligence. And then to reach out to BCUC to potentially give them free reins. You know, if we could create a pipeline that Fortis BC can operate, we bypass the Grizzly plant, solve a lot of these problems. And if anything, it potentially creates that tension that we need to have in a competitive market to to coerce P&G to offer us lower rates because, hey, we got another person at the table. So I've brought this to staff, and they do need direction to reach out. So I'd like to make a motion.
Yep. Take a motion.
That staff contact. Oh, slow down. That staff contact Fortis BC about potentially offering services Tumbler Ridge and to contact BCUC to allow Fortis BC to operate in the area.
So just before we get a seconder, should we confirm that Fortis wants to come here first?
That's the first part of the motion.
Yeah, but until we hear back from Fortis, would you want to wait? Maybe Fortis does not want to come. And then we're contacting this other governing body to say, oh, like, open it up to Fortis, but Fortis didn't want to come here. You know what I mean? Councillor Howe?
What if there's somebody else?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
Like, not to say that this is, it's just this grasping at straws here, but, you know,
I just thought, I was just.
CNRL in the area runs their gas through the P&G plant, and that's where our gas comes from, right? But is there a possibility that P&G or CNRL might be able to provide us gas directly or do some upgrades to their plant or something? But just to say, there may be others, I don't know.
Councillor Rudy?
If we could second that motion, maybe we can propose an amendment to, rather than say Fortis BC, just allow.
It's not seconded, so it's not seconded, so we can actually change it. That's why I didn't
Oh,
want to
okay.
second it. So we want to change the wording, now's the time instead of doing an amendment.
And I think,
Yep, go
and
ahead.
I think we should just remove, so contact PCUC to allow other operators in the area.
You just have staff read that back once they have, just to make sure before we second it.
Okay. That staff contact BCUC about other potential companies that could operate in the area.
The whole motion.
That's the second part, the first part of the motion?
That's the second part.
And the
You wanted
first,
the first part too?
Yeah.
Oh, all together? Okay. So that staff contacts Fortis BC about potentially offering services to Tumbler Ridge, and that staff contact BCUC about other potential companies that could operate in the area.
Seconded?
I thought,
Oh, go ahead.
I thought we were going to look for other providers instead of just Fortis.
that's the
The second part.
That's the second part. That's why I didn't read it back. So
Oh.
she took out Fortis, we're gonna contact Fortis.
Okay,
See if they're willing to come to Tumbler Ridge, but the BCUC is looking for any other company. So it says. Staff, Ms. Thompson, you can just read it back.
okay, sorry.
All right, here we go. That staff contacts Fortis BC about potentially offering services to Tumbler Ridge, and that staff contact BCUC about other potential companies that could operate in the area.
Seconder? Councillor Howe? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Carried. Any more discussion in regards to that? Councillor Albrecht?
Thank you, it's great. Thank you, staff, for reaching the deadline. I know we've had a lot of pressure from our community, and we've done it. Thank you.
Thanks to staff. Okay, resolution, closed meeting. Make the recommendation that the meeting of the District of Tumbler Ridge scheduled for February 14th, 2022 be closed pursuant to Community Charter Provision Section 91K. K is negotiations, related discussions with respect to proposed provision of a municipal service that are at the primary stages, and that in the views of the council could reasonably be expected to harm the interest of the municipality if they were held in public. Second. Councillor Lehman, sorry. All in favor? Carried. 5-minute break. I'll teach you what that is.
Sorry, it's so hard on you, man, but.
That's exactly the kind of stuff that I want.
I just know, like,